Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see second part, what if Deku had the legacy of Phoenix Rising Quirk? Here is short summary. Izuku, son of AFO and born in the past Inko, is transported through time as a baby for his protection. He ends up present day in the lap of Shota Aizawa, a young pro-hero who didn't think a raid would end in him taking home kid technically older than he is, and later finds out he's the son of major supervillain. As Izuku grows, he comes into his own, wants to follow in his dad's footsteps, and maybe find out about his past while he's at it. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. When Shota wanted Izuku to stay a kid forever, he never realized how long that wouldn't last. After having a small party for Izuku's 4th birthday with family, and his new friend, Izuku shot up like a weed. Well, mainly in age, Shota was pretty sure Inko was fairly short, and Izuku also inherited that from his mom. Even currently shy of just turning 13, Izuku was short. They didn't get many other answers out of Yoichi, who had been scarce as of late. The Quirk ghost had been keeping his promise of Shota's looming threat and had been tight-lipped to Izuku about anything that Shota was keeping from him. Mainly just the year Izuku was born, but that was still a major bomb Shota wanted to keep hidden. However, Shota liked that Izuku had someone who could tell him about his mom. Izuku learned her name was Inko Midoriya. She was a kind woman who only wanted the best for him. She loved baking and caring for others. Izuku had been told she died in a villain attack, and Shota found him on scene. Not entirely a lie, but of omission. Shota had to do his own investigating with Tsukauchi to look into Izuku's past to find out as much as they could before they hit the roadblock of having to ask a child. They did, however, get his full name, Yoichi Shigaraki, and indeed he died over 100 years ago, not long after Inko Midoriya, according to records. Unfortunately, any records of his brother, Izuku's father, had been wiped, including anything that could have his name on it, from birth certificates to marriage. A dead end. It was almost like he didn't have a brother. Shota thought this would put them back a square one, but Tsukauchi begged to differ and said he'd relay the information onto someone who might be able to give some answers. Shota was still miffed that Tsukauchi refused to tell him who. All what they've learned so far, especially with Izuku's quirk manifesting, was valuable. The ability to use the quirks of people's DNA he absorbs into his body. Whether he ingests their DNA or gets blood on his own open wounds, as long as the DNA comes in contact with the inside his body. Shota realized a problem and hoped Izuku would never need a blood transfusion or something, as Izuku's quirk seemed to always be on and he was unable to decide if he absorbed the quirk or not. Shota knew as Izuku got older he was going to have to ask some favors to allow Izuku to train and eventually collect more quirks so he'd be better equipped. Shota planned to give him erasure eventually, but not until he started high school or a little before. So far he had only collected one, the fire-breathing one, and that one alone was getting him into trouble. Completely not on purpose, most of the time, but Shota really did have to look into some kind of insurance, and he was not getting his deposit back. Izuku didn't make any other friends besides Katsuki, much to Shota's dismay. Not that Izuku acted like he needed them, as the two kids were thick as thieves. Katsuki swore Izuku was his best friend and they were going to be heroes together. That meant they were always at their apartment making a ruckus and one of them swearing up a storm. He also got to know Mitsuki and Masaru Bakugo. He's going to say it, he prefers the patriarchal more than the matriarchal. Masaru was a gentle soul who was pretty calm compared to his hot-headed wife and son. However, they were good people and Shota knew he could count on them if Izuku were needing help. They also didn't mind keeping Izuku overnight when he had patrols and could use the reprieve to sleep or take care of other business. No matter what, Shota always made sure to come home. Before they knew it, Izuku was 13 and going into the fall season of his first year of junior high school. Keeping his word, Izuku didn't have any more incidents about jumping in to save someone. Because training with applique was a little more difficult, as it was more a subtle power that became something more, Izuku mainly worked with fire breath. He learned his output depended on his lung capacity, and of course the analytical side of him determined that depending on how his mouth was open or how lips were positioned changed the output. A full widespread blast or a streamline point. Even if Izuku didn't gain any other abilities, Shota knew his son would be able to achieve his goal of becoming a hero with that power alone. Not that Shota would let him practice with it. Izuku, how was school? Shota asked as he put down Izuku's plate for dinner. Fine, Izuku said as he thanked the food along with Shota. Just fine, Shota asked as he raised an eye, taking a bite. Izuku always loved talking about school and everything they did in class. Or he'd be talking about Katsuki. Izuku, you'll tell me if something's wrong, right? Yup, Izuku answered as he looked a little nervous before his eyes shined remembering something. We had a test today and I did pretty well. Also apparently there will be a new student starting tomorrow. Oh, are you hoping to make friends with them? Shota asked. I don't know, maybe. Izuku answered with a hopeful smile, then looked to see that the bite he was about to eat wasn't crispy. Making sure Shota wasn't looking, he let out a small flame to cook it. Izuku sighed as he looked at his desk that morning that was covered in black permanent ink. Every day it was covered in cruel words that dug into his skin and self-esteem. Izuku liked school, or more accurately he loved to learn, but he hated coming to school. He found himself going home each day learning more about how mean kids could be and what new bruises he had than the lessons taught. Everyone talked, and no matter what Izuku said they didn't listen. People that knew about the preschool incident blamed him for what happened that caused some of their friends to leave. The few kids that were fine with him all went to different schools. That wasn't too bad as kids were young and people ignored that. However, his quirk made the incident always be remembered. Of course, everyone wants to know what quirk a person has, and as soon as something is mentioned that is not seen as normal or cool, it is game over. When people first learned about his quirk they all thought it was just fire breath. People thought it was so cool, he was like a dragon, until Izuku corrected them. So you have to eat like hair to use your quirk. Or blood. Yeah, and then I'm able to. Ew. That's disgusting. Izuku stopped telling people who asked about his quirk, and even if people didn't ask they were told by the other kids as a warning. He was tempted to lie claiming fire breath, but that wouldn't work. Everyone in school knew about his quirk and would just out him before it even had a chance. Even if it did, the others who know would still torment him. They left pieces of hair on his desk that Izuku simply brushed off, not taking the bait. They'd leave blood drops everywhere, that was actually just toxic paint or something. They'd tell him, use your quirk, eat it, lick it. They kept telling people to watch out that Izuku would eat their hair or their blood because he was jealous of their powers or he was greedy. Izuku didn't think what they did to him was so bad. He could ignore it for the most part. However, he hated what they did to others he was close to, or at least the one person who stuck by him. Kachan had always been his friend and not bothered by his quirk. As a kid his friend told him he could be the best of the best all rolled up into one hero, but remember, he wasn't beating him. He'd be the perfect hero partner as he could always have a backup plan. Kachan wasn't necessarily getting bullied by the other kids, but he was getting in trouble for sticking up for Izuku. Kachan had gotten into a couple fights already and Izuku tried swaying him not to, thinking about his future. Luckily Kachan seemed to never have gotten in trouble because the teachers liked him. They were okay with Izuku, but they knew better than to piss off his father, who was rumored to be a pro hero. Despite just being a rumor, they took it seriously. Well, serious enough not to call his dad and tell him. Izuku absolutely refused to tell his dad himself. His dad would flip if he knew that Izuku was being bullied and would go to the extreme of taking him out. He was overprotective of him. Izuku knew that for sure, and while Izuku understood the reasons, he couldn't burden him with a simple problem of him getting bullied. It was best to just stay quiet and not cause any more problems. Alright, which one of you did it this time? Katsuki screamed as some kids around them started to snicker. Kachan, stop, Izuku said softly as he covered the words with his notebooks. Hell no, Katsuki snapped, you're all just jealous shits. Kachan, please sit down before you get in trouble, Izuku said, pulling his sleeve down. Fine, Katsuki snorted before plopping down in his seat. He then turned around to look at Izuku. You really need to tell him or I will. Izuku shook his head. No, he's got enough on his plate. I don't want to bother Dad more than I do already. You're not bothering him. He's your dad, you moron. I know, but it's complicated. You always say that, but never tell me why. Hero business, right? Katsuki asked. Yeah, Izuku said. That pretty much summed it up. Kachan knew he was adopted, but that was about it. Other than that, he wasn't allowed to tell Kachan anything regarding the fact his actual father was apparently a villain and his dead uncle occasionally talks to him. As Izuku got older, he realized Chi-Chi, or as he preferred to be called Uncle Yo now that Izuku wasn't four, talked to him less and less. He mentioned something was coming, but before Izuku could ask, he disappeared. Izuku hadn't seen him in months and was starting to get worried. Good morning, students, their teacher said as he walked in. Everyone greeted him with the same nonchalant energy. As I said yesterday, we have a new student, come on in and introduce yourself. The door opened and walked in a bit of a taller boy with wild purple hair. The boy looked like he could use a nap and kept the collar of his jacket up high. My name is Shinso Hitoshi. Nice to meet you, I guess. Shinso said in a raspy voice. He then rubbed his throat some. Apologies, allergies are making my throat sore. No worries. Please go and sit beside Midoriya Aizawa. As Hitoshi walked past the people in the row, he heard whispers about how they felt sorry for him. He was surprised to hear that. No one ever really felt bad for him. As he got closer, the blonde sitting in front, who he assumed was Midoriya Aizawa, glared at him. Geez, touchy. As he went to sit, he caught a glance at the boy's desk. The surprise never showed, but Hitoshi couldn't believe all the nasty things that were specifically written only on his desk. He knew from his last school that it was deliberate. Good. Now for class today we'll be going over. Hitoshi wouldn't let it bother him anyway. He wasn't here to make friends anyway. They didn't need to butt into his problems, and school was the only escape. The bell rang for lunch and Izuku thought it best not to bother Shinso. Everyone was swarming around him trying to make friends, and Izuku would rather not be around when they warned him about him. He looked like he was more of a loner type, but Izuku hoped he was alright. He could see some bruising near his collar when he introduced himself, and Izuku began to doubt allergies were really the reason why. Although he'd happily help him if he needed it, he didn't want to be around when he'd get bullied for doing the right thing. Before he could barely stand up, a hand pushed him and Izuku went toppling out his chair onto the floor. Izuku hit the floor with a rather loud thud and hissed at his new bumps and bruises he was definitely either going to hide or lie about later. I'll kill you, Katsuki screamed. Kachan, no, Izuku yelled as he stretched out an arm toward him. But he shoved you, Katsuki said as he whipped around at the green-haired boy. I know, but I don't want to get you in trouble, Izuku said as he hurriedly got up, grabbed his books, and then Katsuki's arm to drag him away. Hitoshi watched them go as Midoriya Aizawa dragged the blonde kid he learned as Bakugo, who was yelling the whole time about it being unfair as he glared at the boy who shoved him. The kid's red eyes screamed murder, and Hitoshi was envious that the other boy had someone looking after him. Don't worry about those freaks. Katsuki's just a guard dog, but has an awesome quirk. Once he gets into a hero school, he'll drop that worthless piece of shit. Deku's the real freak though. He can use your quirk if eats your hair. Can't be original, and it's pretty gross, right? A male student said as he started laughing. Yeah, they say his dad is a pro hero, but we don't buy it. I think they're trying to cover up for him being a villain's kid and attacking someone in preschool. Yeah, poor Katsuki is just blind. Surprised Deku doesn't have his quirk yet. Maybe he does. Think they kissed to get it? The kids around them started to laugh. Hitoshi gripped his hands tight. Why did he expect anything different here? It may sound cruel of him, but he had a thought that if he played along with the others, taunted Midoriya Aizawa, then maybe they'd all leave him alone. He couldn't deal with hell at school and at home. But Hitoshi remembered what his goals were and that didn't align. He was better than that. They were so stupid, he thought as he got up and left without saying a word as they all yelled at him for being rude and to come back. Izuku picked at his bento as he and Katsuki ate on the roof. Food really didn't seem all that interesting as he listened as Katsuki was still going on about how he should let him hit the asshole who shoved him. As much as Izuku tried to calm him down, the blonde still wanted to march down there and explode his ass. It's okay, Kachan. Just like 2.5 more years then we'll be in high school. Hopefully we won't have to worry about them anymore. You mean going to UA high school, and since you and I are the only ones going to be going there from here, I would sure hope so. Katsuki grumbled, tossing a bite into his mouth. Might want to make it 3 people. What the hell do you want? Katsuki yelled at Hitoshi, who had walked through the door to the roof. Oh hi Shinso. You're welcome to join us if you want, or we can leave. That Izuku. Bags can leave. We were here first. If you've come up to give us shit, don't, or I'll be happy to explode your ass off the roof. Katsuki interrupted. Kachan, be nice. Sorry about him. Don't apologize for me, asshole. I mean it. Take a chill pill. I just wanted some peace and quiet and couldn't help overhear you saying you wanted to get into UA. You won't be the only ones, Shinso said. Izuku noted that his voice sounded a little better. Hours of not talking probably helped. Think you've got a shot, huh? Probably have a quirk to match too. Katsuki snorted. Quirks don't matter, Kachan. You know that. I bet no matter what your quirk is, I bet it's amazing and useful to a hero. Izuku said. But you don't even know what it is? Hitoshi asked, rather surprised. That shouldn't matter. As long as you have good intentions, then any quirk can be heroic. Izuku said. I'm sure they told you, but don't say shit, Izuku. Katsuki said, putting his hand over Izuku's mouth to shut him up. Katsuki's face turned to disgust as he pulled his hand away like it was on fire and wiped it on his pants. Ew. Did you just lick me? Izuku stuck out his tongue at his friend before looking at Hitoshi. He understood that Kachan wanted to protect him, but Izuku thought it best to bite the bullet before someone else fires it. I'm sure they've said things about me, but even though my quirk is seen as gross to them, I'm still going to become a hero. I like my quirk and that's what matters. So that means even if your quirk is seen as bad, it can also be seen as heroic. Simple, right? Izuku said, flashing a smile at him. Hitoshi stared at Izuku as this kid, who was apparently getting dragged every day, smiled at him like he could fix all his problems. Sometimes it wasn't so simple, yet he made it seem so. It appeared he might have some idea of what Hitoshi was going through. A bell interrupted them before anything else could be said. Let's go, nerd. That's the 5-minute bell. Better get going too, bags. I'm not being late because you girls wanted to chit-chat, Katsuki said, pulling Izuku along. The blonde had a point and Hitoshi realized he was standing in the doorway. Hitoshi wasn't sure what to think when he walked down the steps toward class as the others followed behind him. Midoriya Aizawa didn't even know what his quirk was, but still thought he could be a hero regardless of that fact. This is coming from the same kid who gets bullied for his own. A quirk Hitoshi thought would be rather useful even outside a hero career and thought it was pretty cool. Izuku could help a lot of people without being a hero. Well, whatever, he silently thanked the boy for the pep talk. Being a hero wasn't such a far cry dream after all. Hey, it's true your quirk is brainwashing, a voice said. Are you going to make us do bad things? How does it work? Because I don't want to get controlled. Hitoshi stopped mid-step and wanted to start panicking. He hadn't told anyone his quirk, so how did people find out? The only people would have known was the school staff because it was on his file. They're not permitted to share that information with anyone except authorized people, and he's pretty sure nosy students didn't count. It was going to happen again. Look, hey, that's not right to say something like that to anyone, a voice shouted. Hitoshi thought this was some cliché movie because Midoriya Aizawa was standing at the top of the steps as a window shined a light on him like this kid was going to save him. Hitoshi thought this was the worst day of school, if not his life. Shota and Hizashi were meeting for lunch after Hizashi's radio show and before Shota needed to be home to see Izuku from school. It wasn't uncommon that the blonde hero would text his best friend in the morning and plead with the tired man about having lunch together. Shota only went because Hizashi said he'd be buying. Hey man, how are things? Hizashi said as Shota sat down. I saw you like a couple days ago. Nothing has changed. Shota deadpanned. I know, but I'm not asking just about you, Grumpy. What about my favorite listener? Hazashi rephrased. I swear, you two are only around me for my son. Shota snorted before answering unsurely. Izuku is fine. Uh-oh, a little trouble in paradise. Hazashi teased. Izuku was almost a teenager and he admitted only to Nimari he couldn't wait to see if Izuku got rebellious and put Shota through hell. Nimari bet Izuku wouldn't, being so sweet. They may or may not have a bet going on. Shota sighed. I'm not sure. Izuku's been quiet lately. Hazashi snorted and Shota smirked. Yeah, I know. Surprised me too. I'm also worried because he doesn't have any other friends besides Katsuki, which I'm glad that kid is, ride or die, for Izuku. But a nice kid like Izuku should be collecting friends like baseball cards. He won't tell me anything and neither will Katsuki when I ask him. They each get this nervous look, but before I can call them out on it disappears. I'll ask him how his day is and he just says fine. Izuku's a shitty liar and I know if I push he won't say anything at all. I know I'm going to have a serious talk with Izuku because I think something is going on at school. I just wish he'd talk to me. I know what goes through that kid's head. He sees I'm tired and doesn't want to bother me, but I'm his father, I'm supposed to. Maybe it's time for a change. Hazashi said as he stirred his drink with his straw. What do you mean? Shota asked, sipping his coffee. Look dude, call me crazy, but I'm getting another job. Shota snorted. Don't you have two already? Yeah, I love them all but I wanna do something with listeners that's more hands-on. I want to be around kids. I love Izuku, but I want what you have. Hazashi explained. I don't recommend babies or you'll never sleep again. Shota said. Oh please. Izuku was an easy baby. I got lucky. Still I love kids and if I can't have my own then I'll work with them. That's why I got a position at UA as an English teacher. They're also looking for a heroic homeroom teacher as well and I think you'd be perfect for the job. Also this will be exactly what the doctor ordered. You get more normalcy in your schedule and Izuku won't have to worry. Shota couldn't help thinking about how logical the solution was. If he got a job at his alma mater then it would solve a lot of his problems and potential future problems. Hazashi was right when he said it would provide a more normal schedule. Since he was doing hero work through the school his patrols would essentially be like a couple times a month if that. He'd be home more and get to be with Izuku. Also a more stable income would be nice. It wasn't as if they were flat broke, but he'd like to not have to worry about money or at least spoil his son when he felt like it. Speaking of school, Izuku's plan was to go to UA just like his family and All Might. If Shota taught there and Izuku was accepted, he would know if someone was messing with him immediately and be able to actually do something about it. It was entirely an all-around win-win situation. Seems logical, Shota answered. I'll think about it. If you did get the job it'd be so awesome. You, me, Nem, and imagine if Izuku goes there. That's what Shota was hoping for. Before they could talk about the subject any further Shota felt his phone vibrate in his pocket and a ringtone shrill. He wasn't expecting anyone to call him and Izuku wasn't out of school for a few more hours. Pulling out his phone he was surprised it was the school. So many different thoughts ran through Shota's head about what could have happened. Izuku might be sick, a villain attack, might as well not waste any more time thinking of the what-ifs. Hello, Mr. Aizawa, yes, this is Aldera Junior High and we were calling to inform you that you're requested to come down to school immediately. What for? What happened to Izuku? Shota asked. It's what your son did. Izuku has gotten into a fight. Please come to school so we may handle the situation. See you soon. Shota wanted to ask more questions, but the hag on the other line, who he recognized as the secretary to the principal that never sat right with him, hung up. The school itself never sat right with him, but it was closest to the apartment complex. Aizawa wanted to send Izuku to private school, but Izuku wanted to go to school with Katsuki. Yeah, that was a battle he lost as Shota caved at the puppy dog eyes. Something up with Izuku? Hazashi asked, having only heard one side of the call. Izuku got in a fight? Shota questioned. You don't sound so sure. Hazashi said. Because I don't believe it. Katsuki yes. Izuku no. Shota said as he got up to head out. Izuku getting in a fight was the last thing he expected. It just didn't add up because from her tone it sounded like she was insinuating that Izuku started it. Izuku wasn't violent like Katsuki and certainly knew better than to start a fight, but Shota surely taught him how to finish one. If Izuku was going to be a hero, he made sure Izuku knew basic self-defense until at least next year or his last year of middle school, where they'd sit down and seriously talk about training. Regardless, Izuku knew self-defense to be able to stop his attacker and cause minimal, but effective damage. I'll go and we can take my car. I don't like this either. Hazashi said, pulling out his wallet to pay for their meals and leave as soon as possible. Thanks, Shota said. Although it didn't sound thankful, Hazashi knew better. Hazashi loved how adopting Izuku transformed Shota. He was much more open with his emotions and it didn't feel like pulling teeth to keep in contact with him. After graduation and before finding Izuku only a couple years later, Hazashi could count on one hand how many times he'd seen Shota outside of work. He took the death of Shirakumo pretty hard and Izuku was exactly what he needed. Shota's life turned around all because a little baby fell into his arms. He wanted that, and after being there for them both all these years, he was also ready to square up to protect his nephew or any kids that came into his care. After hearing about Izuku being more withdrawn lately, it didn't feel right. Izuku told his dad everything. Izuku was the most important thing in Shota's life and he knew by now that man would do anything for his son. Chapter text. Shota never thought his greatest enemy would be a car ride. He bounced his knee impatiently as Hazashi drove as fast as possible without breaking any laws and endangering any civilians. They were pro-heroes on the way to a potential case. They could have run that red light. Hazashi could have used that lead foot of his and gunned it. He wished he had his binding cloth with him so he'd have something for his hands to fiddle with. He dragged his hand over his face, pulling as he went. This was madness and Shota was overwhelmed with concern. The ride allowed nothing more than time for Shota to stew and simmer with the thoughts of the phone call. Izuku got in a fight. He's said it before and he'll say it again, Izuku knows better than to start fights. He was well aware that Izuku would verbally fight someone, but physically, not his son. Not the son Shota knew wanted to get into UA and couldn't afford to start fights. However, this is the son who had refused to talk to him about school for the last couple months when Shota started noticing the signs. Izuku would never come to him when something was directly bothering. He never has. Shota was still haunted by the fear in Izuku's small voice asking if he loved him all those years ago. Hazashi didn't even put the car in park before Shota flew out of the door. The car was still rolling to a stop in the parking lot. He wasn't a pro-hero for nothing if he couldn't handle a little speed bump. He also almost broke the doors to the building trying to get in as quickly as possible. Izuku was in trouble and he wasn't going to stand by and let something else happen. Hazashi quickly grabbed his arm and yanked, and if it weren't for his quick reflexes to realize who it was, Shota would have punched him. Bro, you gotta calm down, he said a little out of breath. I knew something was wrong with him. Hey, it's like you said. You can't push him or he'll shut you out. Now you actually talk to him and help him. Yeah, you're right, thanks, Shota said, taking a breath. You'll be a good parent, Hazashi. I think you mean teacher. No, Shota said as he walked in to see kid with purple hair pacing in the halls. Hey, we need some help. They heard a student yelling as he pounded on the closed door to the nurse's office stationed outside the main office. The kid looked frantic and out of breath. Hey listener, what's wrong? Hazashi said, running up to the boy. The boy turned around and looked shocked to see them. Present Mike was someone people could recognize outside of costume since he did various daylight patrols in his radio show. A lot of people would pinpoint the hero. However, this boy looked to recognize him. His eyes were fixed on Shota. My friend, he's been hurt, the boy said, and they both noticed he seemed unsure. Can you take us there? Hazashi asked, switching into pro-hero mode instead of concerned uncle. If no one had responded to the kids yelling, then whoever it was that needed help still needed it. Don't worry Shota, I'll take care of this, Go see what's up with Izuku. Hitoshi stopped and looked up at them. Wasn't that Midoriya Aizawa's given name? He remembered Bakugo calling him that. Was the pro-hero Eraserhead Midoriya Aizawa's father? Hey, that's not right to say something like that to anyone. Izuku shouted, overhearing what was said about Shinso. Shinso didn't deserve anything Izuku got. As much as Izuku would have loved to be friends with him, he'd much rather him another face in the halls that wasn't going through what he was. Also, his quirk was brainwashing. That sounded awesome. Izuku could imagine all the different ways he'd be able to help in situations. Hostage situations, saved with no casualties, out-of-control quirks, solved and soothed, raging villains, cuffed with no damages. Shinso was going to be an amazing hero one day. Maybe if all this turns out okay, Izuku could ask him some questions, but for now he has to focus. Stay out of this, you freak. The other kid who Izuku knew as Jigoku Akio yelled. He glared at Izuku, daring him to do something. Izuku was well aware who this was, his main tormentor who wrote on his desk and pushed him. He only ever said offhand comments to Kacchan, but he could see they were starting to irritate the blonde because he couldn't do anything. Not with the angel on his shoulder, named Izuku, telling him if he got any marks on his records he couldn't go to UA. Jigoku went to preschool all the way up until now with Izuku and Katsuki. He had a quirk that allowed to make small, yet powerful gusts of wind, almost like mini tornadoes, wherever he picked. He actually used to be okay with Izuku until he asked about his quirk. Then it was downhill. All Izuku wanted to know about his quirk and how he could help come up with ideas on how to be a hero. Like if the gusts were so powerful, could he use them as platforms or launch things? Apparently, Izuku had overstepped a line he didn't even see. Izuku's lip wobbled a moment. And no, you can't treat people like this. Not Shinso or Kacchan. But I can treat you like this. He smirked. I don't care, Izuku said. I know no matter what I do people are going to be mean, but they haven't done anything. You can't discriminate because of someone's quirk. It's not like we asked for the ones we get and no quirk is bad. You haven't done shit either. Katsuki shouted. You're not always right, Bakugo. Jigoku sneered. Midoriya Aizawa is just a disgusting liar and should just go choke. You bastard. Katsuki screamed and started to storm down the steps. Kacchan no, Izuku said, grabbing his shoulder as he took a step down. I can tell my dad. I'm gonna be brave. I know he'll do something. Auntie and uncle too. Thank. Katsuki snorted. I better be there. For all of it, was left unsaid. He wanted to be there to see the look on Shota's face and tell him the truth because he was damn well Izuku would sugarcoat it. He also wanted to see this asshole get his just desserts. Shinso narrowed his eyes up at the two at the top of the steps. His dad. He vaguely remembered earlier them talking about how Midoriya Aizawa's dad was a pro-hero. Wasn't probably a big-name hero because if it were he'd be going to a more private school or at least be in homeschooling. At least any good pro-hero would take care of their kid and actually do something, but from what it sounds like he didn't know. Apparently him being a pro was a rumor, but it didn't seem like something the other boy would lie about. Regardless, Hitoshi knew this wasn't going to end well. He kind of wished the other boy minded his own business because Hitoshi knew it was going to be hell later. You think your daddy is going to give a shit? We all know you're adopted. Probably felt bad after he couldn't save your actual parents because he's a joke. Probably would have left you there with them if he knew you're just a freak. Shut up, Izuku yelled. Touchy. Did they really die or did they beat you? Jigoku sneered. You don't know anything. Izuku yelled a little louder and a few people stopped while another whispered about getting a teacher. Izuku held his feet firmly to the ground. Talking about his dad was too far. His dad was a great hero and a great father. Izuku just didn't want to worry him with everything else. He couldn't do that by starting a fight. He knew better. However, if he hit him, his dad told him he was well within his rights to subdue him. Oh, so you do have a backbone. And here I thought you only got on your knees. The light-haired boy smirked. Everyone else laughed as Izuku looked around and panicked. He swallowed down his comment. He knew if he retaliated it would only upset his dad and he was just going to tell him after school. It would turn out fine. He'd walk away before it got too out of control. However, he could see Kacchan's shoulders starting to shake with rage. "You're dead, asshole," Katsuki screamed, tearing himself from Izuku's grip. He didn't care, he was punching this asshole. He may or may not, accidentally, use his quirk under the disguise of having been so angry. Even if he came back to the hellhole, at least he could be proud of the jerk's new face with either a broken jaw, nose, or black eye. His mother would be proud of him. However, someone beat him to it as that purple-haired new kid with eye bags beat him to it. Katsuki watched as Shinso decked the guy across the face, sending him to the floor. Katsuki stopped mid-step and almost barked out a laugh. He was slightly pissed he couldn't do it, but there was always tomorrow. "What the hell? You're defending that freak," the boy yelled as he spit out blood from when he bit his cheek as he quickly got to his feet. "Yes, I am. He's actually pretty cool," Hitoshi said with a small smile at the green-haired boy who gave him one back. He meant it. Midoriya Aizawa was cool. Even with Jigoku announcing what his quirk was, the green-haired boy didn't look the slightest bit bothered by it. He almost looked intrigued. He remembered what he said on the roof and for once, he believed something someone told him. Midoriya Aizawa was a good person. "Defend him from this," the boy snarled as he outstretched his hand. Before anyone knew it, a small tornado appeared under Izuku's feet, launching into the air. Izuku yelped in surprise as his feet left the floor, but was silenced as his back and head hit the steps. Izuku then slid down the steps, stopping on the landing and laid there crumpled up, unmoving. Jigoku snarled as he stepped forward and stepped on Izuku's hand. "Ah!" Izuku screamed as felt his hand being crushed under his foot and tried to pull it away, which only made the other boy press harder. "Izuku!" Katsuki cried as he ran to him and used an explosion to blast him back. Jigoku stepped back in time for only his uniform to become scorched. Katsuki swallowed the overwhelming urge to swipe at him, but Izuku was more important. Katsuki kneeled down next to Izuku and carefully reached out to touch him, but stopped, remembering from all those years ago when he watched Izuku get flung across the room in preschool. He remembered what Shota did. He needed to make sure he didn't break anything, but he didn't know how. Luckily, it looked like the reason he couldn't speak was because Izuku got the wind knocked out of him, but he could see his eye prickle with tears and laced with pain. His hand looked broken though. "Shit, are you okay?" I don't know," Izuku tried to say as it came out in shaky breaths, and he tried not to cry. Everything hurt so much he couldn't tell if something was broken, maybe except his hand. He needed to focus on his breathing or he was going to panic. No doubt his dad would learn after this, and Izuku didn't know what hurt more. "Is he okay?" Hitoshi asked, kneeling next to him. "I don't know." "Izuku, are you seriously hurt anywhere?" Katsuki asked again. Izuku didn't answer as Izuku put his forehead into the floor. "He might be concussed. Can you go get the nurse and hopefully she does her job?" "Yeah, I can do that." He had to do that. It was the least he could do. He could at least help and inconvenience one person in his life. "Don't worry, Shota, I'll take care of this. Go see what's up with Izuku." Hitoshi stopped and looked up at them. Wasn't that Midoriya Aizawa's given name? He remembered Bakugo calling him that. Was the pro-hero Eraserhead Midoriya Aizawa's father? "You know Midoriya Aizawa?" Hitoshi asked cautiously. "I would hope so. He's my son," Shota answered. Holy shit, Hitoshi thought. It was true. Hitoshi looked up to this man since he saw a video of him a few years ago. It wasn't very good, but he could definitely tell who it was. From there he went to online forums, and some of them had information on underground heroes who stay out of the media and limelight. Hitoshi knew that was what he was going to be. He was going to prove everyone wrong and help people with his quirk. His first step now was helping someone who helps others. "You're friends with Izuku? He hasn't mentioned you?" Shota asked. He's been cool. I'm Shinso and I just started here." "Never mind. He's the one who's hurt," Hitoshi said, getting to the point. Shota swore under his breath. Damn it. This was the price he was paying for not paying attention. For not pushing Izuku to talk about what was bothering him. Hell, he should have just pushed Katsuki. Eventually that kid's extremely short patience snaps and he opens his big mouth. That's how Shota found out whose idea it was to play with their quirk at park and almost cause a fire. Let's go and start explaining, Shota said sternly. Without another word Hitoshi took off with the pro-heroes on his tail. If they didn't know where they were going they would have left him behind. Shinso didn't waste another second and explained to him what happened. He watched as the man's face went from pride to anger then guilt to finally landing on concern. Midoriya Aizawa hit me and I know I shouldn't have fought back sir, but I couldn't not defend myself. You know how he's a little jealous. He just couldn't take it and broke his hand hitting me. Bakugo of course takes his side and tries to attack me with his quirk. Jigoku said as he acted like he had been victimized. You liar, Katsuki yelled as he held Izuku up. He was able to determine Izuku hadn't broken anything in his back, but was going to have nasty bruising. Katsuki was worried about a concussion in his hand. It didn't seem like he broke anything else, but Katsuki couldn't tell as Izuku had taken a pretty hard hit. He didn't outwardly cry out when Katsuki got him to his feet so he took it as a good sign. Be quiet Bakugo, this doesn't concern you, the principal said, holding his hand up. We've already called everyone's parents involved. You just ed up dipshit. Katsuki growled. Bakugo, please do not interfere. Now, release Midoriya Aizawa. He's fine and just faking it to escape punishment. He's hurt you jackass, Katsuki yelled. Kachan. Izuku groaned as the yelling was making his head hurt. Sorry, I'm taking him to the nurse. I don't think so, the principal said as he reached out and grabbed Izuku's arm who cried out in pain. Let him go, Katsuki yelled, pulling his friend back. Izuku whimpered as the principal pulled harder until a hand landed on the man's shoulder and roughly pulled him back. The man faltered before regaining his balance looking up to see a pissed-off raven-haired man. Thank you're here, Katsuki said in relief. Oh that's Present Mike, a girl said eagerly. That other guy must be a pro too. Good, now they'll take that disgusting freak away. Yeah, I hope Midoriya Aizawa liked being a hero while it lasted the whole, 15 minutes of fame. Shota had to swallow his urge to turn around and scream at these kids. They were talking about Izuku and now everything made sense. He hated it. Izuku was being bullied at school and his son couldn't come to him. Izuku wasn't a freak. He was different as they all were and everyone deserves respect. Shota wondered if the life Izuku lived now was better than the one he would have in his normal century. Would bullies be the least of his problems? He liked to think so. I didn't think pro-heroes were required for simple altercation. I guess the boys were using their quirks when they weren't supposed to. The evidence is on Jigoku's uniform. Bakugo's quirk is explosions and Midoriya Aizawa, while a rather unpleasant quirk, has used it in order to obtain a fire breathing. I know what their quirks are. And I would appreciate it if you don't lay a hand on my son. Shota growled. Your son? I would never. Katsuki, is my son okay? Shota asked. No, Katsuki answered and Shota's expression twitched in anger. Izuku needed a hospital then. He looked over Izuku and while the only injury he could see was his hand, who knows what Izuku could have underneath his uniform or internally. He had seen his fair share of concussion and Izuku looked very disoriented. The hall of students watching whispered as they all realized who the scruffy man with his hair up was. He was Mr. Aizawa, Midoriya Aizawa's dad. This man was supposedly a pro-hero, he had to be since he was with Present Mike. So they weren't just rumors and everyone looked around nervously. By the look on the principal's face he looked like he noticed too. Oh, Mr. Aizawa, my apologies. We've rarely gotten to meet in person and... Save it, Shota growled as he barely flashed his quirk. Shinso explained what happened. I'll also be opening an investigation and requesting the camera footage. I don't think that's necessary Mr. Aizawa. Boys will be boys and things got a little heated, the principal said as he started to look panicked. I think it is. Anyone questioned would also find it in their best interest to tell the truth or they'll be charged with giving false information and possible aiding and abetting. Shota added and all the spectators now looked severely uncomfortable. Good. If any of them weren't honest, they could forget about applying to any hero school. I called an ambulance and the cops, they'll be here soon. I also texted my boss to let him know and he's more than happy to help. Hazashi said. Shota knew what that meant. He called Nezu and he's probably cackling as he sips his tea. I can take it from here if you want to get him checked out. Thanks, Shota said, grateful for his best friend before rushing over to his son. Carefully he put his hand on his cheek. Izuku. Dad. Izuku said. Yeah, I'm here. We're gonna. I didn't. I know you didn't, Shota soothed. We'll talk later, but now I need to get you some help. I'll take him, Katsuki. I don't think he broke anything in his back, but might have a concussion. Katsuki explained as he carefully handed Izuku over to Shota, who only groaned. Good job, Shota said. You're only taking his side because he's your son. Jigoku yelled. It is because Izuku is my son that I believe he's telling me the truth. Izuku knows better. Shota glared at the child. It was illogical to make assumptions unless you have something to hide. Present Mike will now be the main hero in this investigation. Please follow his instructions and cooperate. They would be opening an investigation on the school, and even if Izuku protested, Shota would be pressing charges against anyone he could. He could at least see 2 people getting arrested. Shota knew for sure Izuku wasn't coming back here, but he could at least make it safer for anyone else in the future and make some changes. Izuku would complain about losing his friends, but he wouldn't be surprised if the Bakugos did the same thing. If he really was friends with this Shinso kid, then maybe they could talk about hanging out. While Izuku healed, Shota knew he needed to find a new school. Maybe Some would be good, and last he heard Hazashi's friend, Tensai Iida, had a younger brother who went there. Izuku would be fine. He was always going to be there for Izuku. Hitoshi watched as they loaded Izuku in the ambulance and his dad right behind him. He could see the concern flowing out his face in waves. Before he was so serious and professional, but now he was allowed to drop his guard a little and actually be there for his son. He was kind of envious. His parents apparently died or something, but he's got a parent who loves him now. Knowing that Eraserhead was going to be taking care of things made things seem not as bad. The man cared about his son, and school should be in for it once Midoriya Aizawa was finally deemed okay. Hitoshi looks forward to school after that day because it seemed like things might look up. They weren't going to get away with what happened. He made a mental note to talk to Midoriya Aizawa, and he guessed Bakugo too. He might actually have friends. Midoriya Aizawa barely knew him and was willing to stick his neck out for him, so maybe Hitoshi could ask him for help. Hitoshi. A voice screamed and Hitoshi's stomach dropped into a bottomless pit. He turned toward the entrance to the schoolyard and a man with tired eyes and wild dark hair stomped toward him. He walked with a bit of a sway and Hitoshi could already tell he had a couple shots already. Probably gearing up for when he got home. Why am I getting a call from this trash school that you instigated a fight? I didn't tell you to speak, Hitoshi's father said as he smacked his son across the face. Hitoshi's head snaps to the side with the resounding sound of his father's hand connecting to his cheek. It's been a long time since Hitoshi had cried about getting smacked around. However, he might have teared up when he saw Present Mike punch his father in the face with a DJ punch and knock his drunken ass out cold. Hitoshi was filled with a flurry of emotions as he looked down at the man sprawled out on the ground. Joy, sadness, fear, rage, relief. You okay, listener? Hazashi asked. Why yes. Thanks, Hitoshi answered. I know it might be difficult, but does he hit you often? Hazashi asked, putting a gentle hand on his shoulder. If Present Mike was friends with Eraserhead and knew their family well, then, why yes. What an asshole, Katsuki said as he watched the cops arrive and drag him away under Hazashi's direction. Couldn't have said it better, listener. Hazashi said. The cops will take care of him. What will happen to me? Hitoshi asked softly. Well, luckily I know the right person to call and then I'll have an answer for ya. Hazashi said, pulling out his phone again and searching through his contacts before stepping away to give space. You okay? Katsuki asked. Yeah, I just can't believe I don't have to see him again, but now what, foster care? Sounds like one nightmare into another. Hitoshi wasn't stupid. He knew what happened to kids like him. He's seen it happen before, which was why he refused to say anything. Either he knew no one would do anything to help him, and if they did he'd be back where he started. All right, tomorrow. Yes, I'll be sure to update you once I know anything on Izuku. Thanks so much. Bye, Hisashi said as turned around at them with a grin. So what now? Hitoshi asked. Well, he's booked until tomorrow for hitting you and being publicly intoxicated, so he's not going anywhere. I have an emergency foster license, so you're gonna come with me tonight. Once we get everything settled here, we'll go to the hospital to check on Izuku. Tomorrow we'll meet with the person I was talking to who will help you. Hisashi explained. It was going to be a couple hours as he worked alongside the police and questioned everyone. Hopefully by then Shota will have an update on Izuku. Who the hell did you call? Katsuki asked. Just someone who knows a thing or two about placing kids, Hisashi said with a wink. They immediately took Izuku back for a series of tests including X-rays and CT scan. Shota hated that he couldn't go back with him, finding himself back in the same position he started in. However, as soon as they got him situated they'd come get him. Shota took a breath and sat down in the chair. Izuku was a pretty healthy kid and maybe got a cold or two every once in a while. So far in Izuku's life he's only been at the hospital 3 times. When Shota first found him, the first ear infection he got as a baby, and the preschool villain incident. Everything else Izuku had was covered by the doctor's office that he took him to. This was number 4 and Shota hoped it would be the last time for his childhood years. With Izuku adamantly wanting to be a hero, Shota knew he was going to get called often when Izuku found himself in trouble. Shota, a sweet voice said. Shota looked up to see Megumi standing there. Megumi, Shota asked the woman who was essentially Izuku's grandmother. What are you doing here? I was dropping off my latest blankets to the kids. Are you all right, dear? You didn't get hurt on the job, did you? She asked. No, it's Izuku, she gasped as her hands flew to her mouth. Yeah, he nodded. He got hurt at school. Is he all right? She asked. I think he'll be fine. It didn't look too serious, but he was being bullied. That's good, he'll be all right. I hate to see anything happen to him. That boy, she said as she shook her head before she sat down beside him trying to catch her breath. Shota noted she looked tired and she was starting to get bags under her eyes. Are you all right? Shota asked in concern. Fine, dear. Just getting on in my years. She answered with a smile. That boy is such a sweetheart and doesn't want to burden you. But I'm his father. He should. Have you seen your eye bags, dear? She interrupted and Shota stuttered. Damn, he forgets she's a rather honest woman. You look tired and I know Izuku doesn't want to bother you. He does it all the time with me. I won't get around to cleaning something and he always does it when he comes over. Even when I tell him not to. Talk to him. He knows you love him, but he's just like his daddy and wants to look out for others instead of himself. Shota got the point she was trying to make. He needed to start thinking about the family as a whole and not individually. He solved problems as they came up and not as a whole. Maybe Hisashi had a point and he'd look into that position at UA. Nezu always seemed to like him the most out of his class, so Shota didn't think asking the rat, mouse, bear, whatever should be a major issue. With Hisashi telling his new boss what happened, Shota figured they'd be talking sooner than later anyway. Teaching wouldn't be so bad and he could make sure the next generation heroes, Izuku, would be ready to take on any challenge. He can prevent things that happen to the people he cares about and protect those others care about. Thanks. Shota and Megumi lurched forward to the floor as an explosion rocked through the hospital. Chairs were tipped over and video screens had fallen off the walls, shattering as they hit the floor. People screamed as they were tossed around by the shockwaves and Shota could hear screeches echoing from somewhere. At first he thought it might have been some kind of earthquake. It's a villain. Shota cursed his luck. This really was the worst day to forget his binding cloth. Chapter text. Hospital evacuation was always a nightmare. Doctors and nurses weren't pro-heroes. They weren't allowed to fight, only in the self-defense of themselves and their patients. Everyone was panicking and working as quickly as possible, especially if there were no pros on scene. To everyone, or at least as many as possible, made it out. They needed to get them away from the villain or any fight that would break out. The halls were filled with loud noises as people screamed and shouted orders. Luckily a pro-hero had been in the hospital and could help. Whether it was to take down the villain or buy time until help arrived. However, Shota was one pro and as the only one on scene for minutes his priority would be taking down the villain even though he wanted to find Izuku. That's why she took it upon herself to find him, reassuring him he could do his job and protect everyone. "Excuse me, miss." She grabbed one of the nurses' attention. "Has Midoriya Aizawa been evacuated?" "Who?" she asked although she seemed annoyed. "A boy that was brought in maybe within a few hours ago." "Look grandma, we're trying our best here. He's probably outside," the nurse said as she pulled away. She was lucky she wasn't employed here anymore or she'd make her listen to a lecture. Yes, she understood these were tense times, but that was no way to speak to anyone. He was most likely alone and still out of it. From what information she got from Shota, Izuku wouldn't be in any position to completely move himself and even if he could he wouldn't know what to do. Yes, getting outside was obvious, but hospitals were mazes. She remembered telling Izuku about all the different adventures she had between these halls. "Megumi, what did you do before you retired?" 7-year-old Izuku asked, looking up from his coloring book. Dad was currently at work and he was grounded from Kachan's house for burning the curtains. That didn't matter. He loved being with Megumi. "I was a nurse at the local hospital." Wow, that's so cool. That's why you're so good at taking care of people when they get hurt. Was it fun? Did you save a lot of people? Can you tell me anything? Oh, does your quirk help you any? Megumi chuckled. It wasn't often she was asked about her previous work. Everyone would rather listen to pro-heroes and the villains they defeated or the people they rescued from their clutches. No one wanted to hear about the hospital staff or to a senior citizen talk about the good old times. "I helped a lot of people and loved every minute of it. I would do it until I died, but I wanted to spend my days with the one person who stood by my side." Seeing the looks on their faces made it worth it. "One day you'll understand. Do you want to hear about the time I saved a hero and then he defeated a villain seconds after that we were also treating? Or the time we had to chase down someone's sentient quirk when it got loose?" she asked. "Yeah," Izuku said as his eyes shined. All the stories were true. She might have exaggerated a little, but the shine in his eyes made it worth it. Megumi walked as fast as she could through the halls. The screaming and fast-paced movements weren't new to her. She worked in this hospital for over 50 years, so this was just another day down memory lane. However, she'd love to be that young again. She wished she could have a fraction of the ability to run so she could find her grandchild faster. She promised Shota she'd look after their boy while he handled whatever villain had infiltrated the hospital. While Shota would disagree, she saw him as her son. She had been with those boys for over a decade and she wouldn't change it. Her and her late husband never had any children and she never saw the rest of her family. She wished she could at least see great niece again. So vibrant, so joyful, she loved hearing about the people she saved. The rest of them claimed she was too involved with her job. They were right, but they didn't have to leave her and couldn't understand that so many people counted on her. Her husband stood by her and was overjoyed she was doing what she loved. She loved watching his gruff face and eyes soften as she talked about each new day like it was the adventure of a lifetime. Age caught up and so did using her quirk. She retired and lived happy with her dear until he died years later. No one came to allow her to cry on their shoulder. He was the one she truly cared about that she couldn't save. That guilt was what stood by her. She was alone until she heard a baby crying. The poor child cried for hours from across the hall. She figured a young pro-hero lived there, but she didn't think he had a child. Nor did she think they'd grow to be so important to her. "Izuku," she exclaimed as she passed by a room and happened to look in at the right time. There was her grandbaby lying on the bed barely awake. She was so thankful to find Izuku's room so she could keep her promise. It was near the back of the hospital wing and from the looks of it the boy had already been checked by one of the doctors or nurses that had some kind of healing quirk. They were probably coming to fetch Shota when the villain attacked. His hand though was wrapped up. "Megumi, what are you doing here?" Izuku asked as he woke up hearing the curtain move. Your dad's taking care of something, but you'll be alright. Izuku, listen, we need to get out of here. There's a villain. Izuku's eyes widened as he now understood the situation. He moved to get out of his bed and winced as he put his hand down. The nurse told him they were able to take care of everything except some of his hand. It was fractured and some intense bruising had already started. Izuku knew once his dad heard about that he was going to be even more pissed off. A creeping anxiety taunted Izuku as he thought about his dad going up against the villain, without his binding cloth. Izuku was 9 years old the first and so far, the only time Shota came home injured with far more than bumps and bruises. The boy was staying with her while Shota had to take a couple days to go on a mission. Not that they would learn anything about it, but Izuku cried that he'd miss him and he was scared he might not come back. Shota and Megumi were well aware that Izuku had some anxiety about Shota doing pro-hero work, from missions to simply going out on patrol. That was also the first time he saw her use her quirk. The night was dark and storming something fierce. Rain pelted the windows and the winds howled. Izuku had left something in their apartment he needed, so when they were grabbing it the door slammed open. They each jumped in fear of someone breaking in. Megumi pushed Izuku behind her and would defend him with her life against the intruder. Despite his hellish look and soaking wet clothes, she knew who this was as he collapsed on the floor. Dad! Izuku shouted in fear and ran toward him. Tears already welled in his eyes and spilled out as he fell next to him and started to shake him. Dad, are you okay? Oh dear, Shota, she echoed as she kneeled down next to him. He was out of it and had a laceration across his chest. While it didn't look deep, it was certainly bleeding, staining his hero costume. He was bleeding all over the floor. He'd lose even more by the time help arrived. Megumi looked at Izuku's scared expression as tears poured out of his big green eyes. He was so scared. Seeing him live through his worst fears was painful. He thought his dad was going to die in front of him. She loved these two pseudo-family members and it only brought back feelings she hadn't thought about in a while. The feeling of watching loved ones look at the people they care about, racked with fear they might not make it. She took a deep breath and put her hands out above his wound. Her hands glowed as spiral lights flowed out of her palms. Megumi always told him stories about the people she helped. She said their feelings were hard to really explain unless you were in their shoes. Certainly words could describe the moment. Relief, joy, speechlessness, thankfulness, and the list continued. Izuku's eyes widened as he watched it all unfold, finally understanding what she meant. The overwhelming feeling of happiness at being saved, where tears uncontrollably spilled out. Pure happiness that the problem that clenched one's heart finally got a happy ending. The sight of seeing a hero save someone. Shota was slammed into a desk as it flipped over it, taking the stacks of papers and charts with him. He pushed himself off the ground as he looked at the villain with bulging muscles. How? This villain had been captured a few weeks ago, by him. The takedown was simple and no one was hurt. So why was he at the hospital now? The man's eyes were dazed and he looked like he didn't know where he was. Regardless, he needed to knock him out and capture him again. I'm getting the out of here before he comes back. The villain cried as he swung his arms, bashing into everything. Screens, windows, desk, beds, all were crushed and shattered under his strength. I won't be used in anyone's game. Once I have my payback and I'm leaving this doomed waste of land. Shota jumped at him and activated his quirk. The man realized his quirk was missing and reared his fist back before striking at the pro. As he was in mid-air, Shota's eyes widened as the man's fist slammed into him, hurtling down the dark, destroyed staircase the villain had come out of. His vision was overcome with darkness and his thoughts were that he hoped his family was protected. Just a week ago, Izuku sat at Megumi's bar counter and was doing his homework. The apartment always smells like cookies and Izuku finds it comforting and warm. He knows he doesn't have to come here after school anymore. He couldn't think of not coming. It was a routine and he'd find himself missing it. His dad wasn't home and the apartment felt a little too quiet, so he often came over to keep her company and enjoy her presence. He loved talking with his Megumi and hearing things from her side. Here you go, dear, Megumi said as she put a cup of juice on the counter next to him along with some cookies that just came out of the oven. Thanks Megumi, what did you do to your hand? Izuku exclaimed, seeing her palm wrapped up in gauze. She smiled as she ruffled his curls. You silly boy, I'm fine. I burned my hand the other day pulling out some cookies. I fell asleep before the timer. I was lucky I didn't burn the place down. Well, please be careful. Does that mean your quirk doesn't work on yourself? Izuku asked as he sipped his drink and then went for a cookie. Unfortunately not, dear, but that was all right. Working in the hospital, I didn't need to worry about that. It wasn't often I was in true danger, she explained. Why not try and become a hero? Izuku asked. You could have been like Recovery Girl and been in the field. I could have, but I thought about the people behind the scenes. The ones that needed help later that heroes can't save. The ones that the heroes save, the people who have people waiting for them at home. You're already a hero to them, Izuku said, realizing it and remembering that night a few years ago. Those people she helped save got to go home with their loved ones. Exactly. She smiled as she touched his nose and Izuku smiled. So, why quit? Izuku asked. It was clear to him that Megumi loved her job as a nurse. Izuku loved hearing about all the people she saved. People who didn't think they were going to make it found themselves with life. With age, I just don't have that much to give and realized I wanted to spend time with people that loved me unconditionally, she said sadly before smiling at him. It's up to the younger generation to take the lead. Right. Izuku's eyes gleamed. Dad and Megumi always told him he would be a hero. He'd make sure to make both of them proud of him. He couldn't wait until they could see it. Shota pushed himself off the cold ground. His body ached and luckily it seemed he was only out for a moment. He needed to get back up there before anyone was hurt. He was much stronger than last time. But how? His quirk, Blood Boost, allowed him to boost parts of his body if he increased the blood flow to it. However, that meant it needed to be sacrificed from elsewhere. He often boosted his physical strength, but this was much different than before. Also, what he was screaming about didn't make sense either. As his eyes adjusted, Shota realized where he ended up, the morgue. Or at least what he thought was the morgue. Tanks upon tanks, jars upon jars of purple liquid, each housing something he would prefer not to think about. Some of the tanks looked like they were holding something inside, while the jars had body pieces, blood, hair, or just about anything that obtained human DNA. A couple of them were destroyed, most likely in the villain's escape. This looked like some monster creation lab. What the hell was this doing underneath the hospital? There was a beep at the computer next to Shota. He looked over and saw it was a list of quirks compiled. Blood Boost was on the top of the list. Quickly his eyes scanned through the list, but stopped as he sharply inhaled. Cloud. It couldn't be. He was dead. Shirakumo died over a decade ago, not long before he got Izuku. This nightmare had his quirk somehow. Has this been going on since he was in high school? Shota had a dark yet hopeful question. Could his friend still be alive after all this time? Regardless, he doesn't think it would be random to mess with him. This data wouldn't have a logical reason to be false, and this was turning into a serious matter. A cough interrupted his thoughts and Aizawa turned to see a man crawling out of one of the broken tanks. His body bled out as a trail of blood followed and pooled in whatever liquid that was. The glass that had shattered shredded his body. Without immediate help the man wouldn't live. You can't let him, the man said weakly. Who? Do what? Shota growled. All, for one, he's after a child. The light drained from the man's eyes as he collapsed on the floor. Shota didn't need to check his pulse to know he was dead. As soon as the villain was taken back into custody, he'd investigate further. Who knows exactly what their plan is? How many more of these could there be in Japan? Who was all for one? What child? He'd have to deal with this later as he turned around and raced back to find where the villain had gone off to. Megumi removed the IV carefully from Izuku's arm. She couldn't be careless taking it out, or it could cause more problems than he might already have in the future. She hated to think she might damage the vein or cause an infection. While she knew her sweet baby would forgive her, she didn't want to cause him any unnecessary pain. It would only take a minute or so. Izuku winced as the needle slid out of his arm and she grabbed a gauze as applied pressure. Carefully she pulled him up, grabbing some tape before leading him out the room. "Well, what do we have here?" a voice said as he looked at the name on the board. Izuku Midoriya Aizawa. Despite the pain he experienced, he was glad he was paying attention. The hero's name, Shota Aizawa, came up, and it was his fault. The creepy little man cursed that the pro wasn't the one there, and at least they could have the criminals he captured instead. He could have a little revenge on the pro that put him in this situation in the first place. Not too many would have the name Aizawa. Regardless, a hero's job was to protect people, and what would hurt more than failing at that? Shota heard screaming before anything as he got back up to the main floor. He cursed at himself, letting himself be beaten and distracted. Someone needed his help now more than before. Rushing toward the echoing sounds, he turned the corner and stopped dead in his tracks. He hadn't been taken back in a while, and he had no time to feel guilty. Regret, anger, concern, fear. Megumi was on the floor and wasn't moving. She looked to have a head wound that was bleeding out, contrasting against the white tile floors. No, he failed her. She had always been there, helping him when he needed and providing him with encouragement that he was being a good dad to Izuku. She was Izuku's grandma. While he could never say, he was glad for her maternal hand in their lives. Last-minute babysitting or advice, she was there. She saved him more than he could count. And he failed Izuku. Choking sounds barked out within the hall, drawing Shota's attention. The sight he saw would add to the many that would haunt him. The villain had a hand clasped around Izuku's throat and was covering his mouth. Tiny flames leaked out around his hand, burning it and parts of Izuku's face that weren't fireproof. His eyes were tightly closed, and it looked like he was losing his breath. Shota was losing his son for what felt like the second time that day. Chapter text. Hitoshi looked on as the ambulance pulled off, getting farther away and more out of sight. No one goes to school expecting someone to leave to go to the hospital, or at least for him, Hitoshi didn't expect the person to go for the sake of protecting him. He had been protected twice, as he was reminded at the bliss of his drunken father being out cold didn't last long, as he could hear the man's echoes as they put him in a police car. He was cursing Hitoshi's name, and that once he got out he was going to get it. He'd make sure he never talked again. Really helping his case there. He already told the officer all he knew about the situation at school, and from the looks of it, President Mike was having a field day as they questioned all the kids. Hitoshi wondered how many of them lied or took the threats seriously. Despite his professionalism, he could see the man clamping his jaw shut, most likely to prevent his quirk from going off. Eraserhead wasn't there to stop him, and the DJ hero looked like he was about to combust. That was something too. Izuku's father was Eraserhead. Hitoshi wanted to know the details of how that came to be. He refused to believe what he heard in the hall until it was confirmed. Still didn't mean he didn't think about it. No one denied that the green-haired boy was adopted, even himself. Was he a family friend? Had Eraserhead actually failed to save his parents? He was a younger pro hero. Why would he randomly adopt a kid if he wasn't involved somehow? Regardless, he was thankful the boy was here despite losing his parents to get here. He saved him. No one had ever stood up for him. Ever. Well, not since his mother died. He was moved schools because the teachers were getting suspicious that he was coming to school with bruises. Once he was no longer there, they didn't care. Out of sight, out of mind. Izuku risked himself to defend him, and now he was on the way to the hospital. His injuries didn't look serious, but he hoped the other would at least be willing to talk to him afterward. He needed to thank him. "You okay, listener?" Hazashi said, coming up to him. "Yeah, I'm fine," Hitoshi answered. "Sure, that doesn't look too nice," Hazashi said, pointing to his neck where the bruises could be seen. "Did that jerk do that to you?" "Oh," Hitoshi said, trying to cover them. Yeah, he'd choke me to injure my voice so I couldn't use my quirk. Said he got more kicks out of it than putting a muzzle on me." "Well, he won't come near you again. I'll make sure of it." "What about your mom?" Hazashi asked. "She died. That's the reason he beats me. He thinks it's my fault." "That's not true." "I know, but after hearing it so long you start to believe it," Hitoshi answered. "Well, the hobo and cockatiel will make sure that bastard isn't coming near you," Katsuki said, Coming back from his own questioning. He didn't let it show, but he was pissed. The school officials were assholes, and of course from what he heard, they tried to make excuses. Well, their half-ass excuses didn't work on the few extra pros that arrived to help. One of them included Izuku's aunt, Midnight. He remembered seeing the woman storm into the building, whip out and ready to use it. And not in the way she was pictured out to be. Listeners right, Hizashi started before deadpanning. Not cool little dude on the crocodile comment, but no one's going to come after you. Not while I'm around, and after what you did for Izuku, I know Shota will be grateful. If Midoriya Aizawa wants to talk to me, Hitoshi said. Are you kidding me? Katsuki snorted. He bet Izuku and Ibags will be best friends by the end of the week. Of course that nerd will talk to you. I know Izuku is very forgiving, and Shota, while my bestie might seem like a grump, he'll appreciate you helping our sunshine. But I didn't do anything. Hitoshi countered sadly. He didn't feel like it. Midoriya Aizawa did all the work. Bakugo stood up for and protected him. And himself. He just stood there and did as he was told. And you got him help. Hizashi said, putting a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes doing nothing is the worst thing someone can do. Especially as a hero. You made sure we knew what was going on and brought us to help. Although it may seem like nothing to you, you informed us, which allowed us to take note of the situation beforehand and be prepared. Sometimes knowing is half the battle, ya dig? Yeah, Hitoshi nodded as he wiped his face. Present Mike. A word, Midnight said as her eyes twitched. Coming, Hizashi answered, following his fellow pro off to the side for a moment. He looked at her expression and knew he wasn't going to like this. It had been a long time since he's seen Nimari this angry. She was seething. What's up? One of the students pointed out Izuku's desk. Midnight said as she showed him a picture with all the rotten words. They called him useless. They said he was gross. They told he could die. Izuku was so sweet, and how could anyone think that? Hizashi saw red. Katsuki. Hizashi growled. Shit. Katsuki sputtered at Hizashi saying his given name. Usually it was just Bakugo unless it was serious. He turned to look at the blonde pro hero to see his eyes shine with anger and tears. What? Is it true? Hizashi asked in anger yet in disbelief. Izuku was being severely bullied. People told him he needed to die. The things they wrote on his desk. Katsuki was normally a very expressive person, but for the first time, he was speechless and only could nod. Yeah, it was all true, and Hizashi apparently knew it was true too, but refused to believe it despite having seen Izuku's desk. Katsuki wished he just pushed harder for Izuku to tell someone, but he knew if had told himself Izuku would have gotten mad. But, at least he would have been safe. Kids will be kids. You all are taking this out of proportion. A teacher yelled, who Katsuki recognized as their own for homeroom. It clearly doesn't bother either Midoriya Aizawa or his father if they haven't brought it forward. Even if the child did, clearly the father doesn't care if it happened until he can make sure to ruin a kid's life as a great hero. Haven't brought it forward. A great hero. Hizashi screamed as he lost control of his quirk for a moment before shutting his mouth and taking a deep breath. This guide of future generations had the audacity to claim Shota was taking out the competition for Izuku being a hero. Shota didn't even know. If he did, Izuku wouldn't be in this school. That kid abused Izuku. He hurt a student. You're his teacher. You're supposed to look out for everyone. Then it hit Hizashi why Izuku never told Shota. 2 reasons. Izuku wanted to go to school with his friend. Hizashi could see that, remembering when Shota transferred into the hero course, he didn't seem sad about it one bit. He wasn't leaving any friends behind and only made friends with him, Nimari, and Shirakumo because they made him. Izuku was afraid he'd lose his only friend, and Hizashi knew Izuku wouldn't tell Shota for the reasons he gave the man earlier. Izuku didn't want to bother him or get anyone in trouble. Izuku probably also thought it might be hard to deal with if the school wasn't on his side. Come on boys, let's go see if there's any updates, Hizashi said, turning around and walking away before he lost it. A news crew had arrived hounding people for answers. He didn't want to give them something else. One of the pros mentioned that a statement might be given and reminded them if they harassed any kids without parents they would lose their jobs. Shut them up real quick as they then just made speculations. Hey, Cockatiel, Katsuki said, getting his attention, and Hisashi noted his voice sounding rather worried. He initially got out his phone to text his hag and hoped for a message from Izuku. However, an alert had gone off that sent panic through him. What's wrong? Katsuki only showed the man his phone. Hisashi's stomach dropped. The hospital had been attacked. The hospital that Izuku had been taken to. Well, what do we have here? A voice said as he looked at the people before him. A little old lady and some kid. Not really on his radar, until he looked at the nameplate. Aizawa, the pro that put him away. Oh, this day was starting to look up. Looking at the two, it was clear who was related to Aizawa, the kid with the bandaged hand and bloody gauze around the crook of his arm. Didn't think Eraser had a kid. Pretty stupid of him. Guessing he's your daddy boy. Megumi put Izuku behind her as they took a couple steps back. Izuku grasped her arm and tried to pull her with him. You won't touch him. She growled. You won't have a choice, lady. He snarled as increased the flow to his arms and swung. His empowered fist knocked into her, sending her flying into the wall. She hit her head before collapsing on the floor. Megumi, Izuku cried as he went toward her before something stopped him. AHK. Izuku grunted as the villain grabbed him by the throat and lifted his feet off the ground. Shota told him he could only use his quirk in self-defense. He was pretty sure this counted. Taking a breath, his throat glowed from the inside and out as he warmed it. Ah. The villain taunted, covering his mouth, muzzling him. Best to keep you shut. Nothing like Eraser's quirk. Must be a mutt. Izuku growled but breathed out as hard as he could so the flames would leak out behind the man's hand. The man's palm started to roast and Izuku felt his skin around his face get licked with flames. Izuku figured out real quick once he got this quirk that it only made his insides, about an inch around his mouth, and lips fireproof. Everything else not so much. However, a couple burns would be superficial compared to his life. You little bastard. The man growled as he gripped Izuku's throat and squeezed, hoping to cut off the boy's quirk. Izuku felt his throat being crushed and was only able to keep up his fire breath for a moment before he was unable to breathe. The villain was going to kill him to get back at his dad. Izuku clawed at his hands trying to pry himself free, but unknown to Izuku the man's quirk was making him stronger. Stronger hands that put pressure on his collapsing throat. Everything was going dark. Dad, what? The man said in shock as he felt the strength drain from his body. As he turned around he only saw a black boot coming across his face. Shota kicked the villain's face, hurtling toward the floor. Izuku collapsed on the floor in a dead heap. Luckily he had the element of surprise and was able to knock him out swiftly. He took out his phone and sent a message to the network that alerted the arriving pros where he was on scene and the villain had been taken down. They should be arriving soon, and until then he'd keep an eye on him and keep him down. He'd also informed them of the nightmare he found downstairs when everything calmed down. Making sure he'd be out for a while, Shota could turn his attention to his family. Quickly checking Megumi's pulse, she was still alive although low and her breathing was rather shallow. From the looks of it and the blood smear on the wall, she smacked into it. For the moment she'd be alright so he could check on his son. Izuku, can you hear me? Shota asked as he heard hard chokes coming from him. He's alright, Megumi asked as started waking up. Blood was staunching her light blue hair as she took in the scene. You're alright, Shota sighed in relief. A blow to the head. Dumb villain. She answered as she slowly crawled toward them and heard Izuku's choked breaths and her eyes widened. Izuku's throat was heavily bruised. The most pressing thing is it appears he crushed his larynx. He can't breathe. Shota bit his lip as he willed himself not to cry as he looked at Izuku's closed ones as he struggled to breathe. Shit, this was bad. Everyone had been evacuated from the hospital by now and Izuku hadn't been able to breathe for almost a couple minutes by then. His son was dying in front of him. Choking on nothing but the emptiness. I'll go find someone. Please, stay with him Shota said as she went to get up. Megumi held out her hand and shook her head as she smiled. Shota didn't understand. Was she accepting that Izuku was going to die? How could she? She loved Izuku as much as he did. She was someone who Izuku went to if anything happened to him. He knew the situation was bad, but he figured she out of anyone would agree they needed to do something. His ranting thoughts were stopped as a soft light swirled out toward Izuku. Shota had only heard of Megumi's quirk from Izuku. He was kind of out of it the first time she used it on him, but after he remembered she needed to rest after he woke up moments after. Wave healing. A quirk that allowed the user to convert their own vitality into a healing energy. As soon as Izuku learned everything about it, Shota knew too, as his son excitedly told him. While the quirk was powerful, she had to use it sparingly as she got older, as it used up her own energy. While she was in her prime she would easily recover, but that was about 50 years ago. If she pushed a little past her point she'd get tired, but if she pushed more than what she had now. Izuku's breathing then settled as the burns on his face began to heal away along with the bruising. Shota hated that he might have seen Izuku's throat inflate. The light stopped as it started and Shota leaned over Izuku, listening to his breathing as it no longer sounded cut off and came much easier. It's much better now. Megumi, are you okay? Shota asked as he caught as she fell over, holding her with the arm that wasn't holding Izuku. I will be, Megumi said as she pushed off Shota and leaned back some. Her own breathing became staggered and she was so tired. She didn't regret it as she felt her energy leaving her. Why would you? Shota asked. That boy wouldn't have lived and I will happily trade my life for his. She answered as she slowly closed and opened her eyes. She looked down at the boy who was currently resting. She only had enough to heal his larynx and a few burns. The rest would remain, but would be faint markings. He'd live. He's got more going for him than I do. I've been tired, Shota. Have for a while. It's all right. I got to save someone I loved and he will too. Did you? Shota questioned. Shota's eyes widened as he realized what she meant by everything. She was going to. She had given. Megumi nodded. He doesn't know. I slipped into his drink last week. Told him I burned my hand. Teach him to not let a dream consume his life or he'll die with regrets. Live a life filled with love. No, I'll go find someone, Shota said, but she shook her head. I'm too spent. Thank you for letting me be a part of your family. I love my boys, Megumi said as she held Shota's hand and weakly reached out and took Izuku's limp one, holding it as tightly as she could. Only if it were for a moment. The hand dropped as Shota heard her last breath leave her lungs. Shota didn't have the will to reach out and check. He gently laid her against the wall. He'd rather stay blissfully unaware as he held on to his son, forever thankful he was still here. As he stared at her he felt something move in his arms. He looked down to see Izuku waking up. Izuku, are you okay? Shota asked, holding his face and looking. His eyes were vibrant as they looked over everything, trying to piece together the scene. Fine, Dad. That villain. What happened? Izuku shuddered before he turned and saw her. You're fine, Shota said, trying to turn his head away. Megumi, Izuku asked nervously as he fought his dad and looked at her pawling face. Dad. I'm sorry, Izuku, Shota said as he started crying and hugged him. Realizing what happened, Izuku began to sob, allowing his dad to hold him. Tears flowed out of his eyes in rivers all over the both of them. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to blame the villain. But he couldn't find it within him. Megumi died saving him. She saved him from the villain and she saved his life using her quirk. She loved helping people and he got some inspiration from her. Izuku wished they could have talked one last time. He wanted to hear her stories that only made his dream of becoming a hero stronger. He heard every word she spoke and held onto it like it was a lifeline. She always told him she couldn't wait to see him reach his dream and had faith he'd get here. While they never walked the same path, they'd take similar steps. They saved people and one would save people. He loved her so much more than she'd known, just being there to support him. She saved him from the nightmares of losing his dad or reminded him of the everyday heroes, like her. He was who he was because of his dad and her. Izuku wished they could talk again so he could ask a question, but a joy filled his soul and he had the answer. Dad told him that even if people die, they're still there, they're a part of you. Every person he allowed into his life would leave an impact and give him something to carry for the rest of his life. They'd still be there in the strengths they passed on. Shota held on to his sobbing, grieving son as he took everything in. He thanked her for being there for him when he needed her. His own personal parenting hero. She made raising Izuku possible, and they raised a hell of a good boy too. When Shota asked her to be Izuku's grandma, she was overjoyed and hugged him. Shota wouldn't forget the smile on her face. Thanks, Mom. Shota pretty much lived in solitary and Izuku by association. Knowing the pro-life was dangerous, Shota set it up where Izuku would get everything if he died and Megumi would be his guardian. It wasn't that he didn't want Hisashi or Nimari to have Izuku, but they were all pros too, who often worked together. Izuku would be alone if anything were to happen to him. Certainly he had the Bakugos, but to trust them with his son. He had some reserves. Shota knew his son. He'd drown himself in anything to make the pain go away. Megumi gave Izuku her quirk. Shota would talk to Izuku about it when the time was right. A time when it didn't hurt so much. He and Izuku would heal, but like it was said, it takes time. Izuku was going to need him more than ever. Holding him tighter, Shota knew he had to start making choices for both of them to make sure they got to live together for as long as possible. She would have wanted that, to see them happy. Chapter text. Katsuki and Hitoshi could only look at the scene before them. The place looked like a disaster waiting to happen. Pro-heroes, employees of the hospital, police were rushing around trying to take care of the madness that spread across the area. Many of the people were in hospital gowns that were being brought back inside. The way it looked, not too many people were injured from the attack. That was always good. The villain must have been stopped in time, who was currently being carted off. That brat should have died. Just like that old biddy. A cuffed man screamed and struggled as police dragged him away. Hisashi's eyes widened hearing the man's rant. He heard the man scream about a demon that would rise, but ignored it in favor of what he first spoke about. Brat. There were plenty of kids that were here, but something in Hisashi's gut told him otherwise. He also was unable to reach Shota. He had been trying since Bakugo told them about the attack. No answer. Just left on. Delivered. Stay here and don't get in the way. Hisashi told the two boys before he rushed inside. Both boys looked at one another with raised eyebrows before shaking their heads and running in after the pro-hero. As Hisashi got to the main lobby unsure of where to go next. At the moment he wasn't a pro-hero, he was a concerned civilian looking for his best friend and his son. Despite the loud noises of people shouting orders and trying to talk over one another, he heard it. A wailing sound echoing through the halls. Even with his hearing not as good as it could be, he heard it loud and clear. He knew who it belonged to. His nephew. That was Izuku. Hisashi ran toward the hall and arrived to see Shota on the floor with Izuku tightly wrapped in his arms. Izuku was clearly sobbing as gripped Shota's shirt. Shota! Hisashi yelled, running up to him. Shota looked at him only for a moment before going back to soothe Izuku. The boy cried and cried, clinging onto Shota for dear life, or was it Shota hanging onto him? Looking around, there was a small blood smear on the wall. Hisashi's heart jumped, thinking that Izuku had been injured in the attack. If he had, then Shota wouldn't have been so out of it. He'd be screaming for help. Shish. It's okay, Izuku. She's not hurting anymore. Shota soothed him. But she. Hisashi turned around to the sound of footsteps behind him. His eyes narrowed over his glasses, seeing the two boys he remembered specifically telling to wait outside. He narrowed his eyes at them for a moment for now following directions, but he could overlook that for the moment while he focused on his family who needed help more. Both boys' eyes were fixed on the scene before them anyway to get into any trouble. Katsuki had never seen Izuku this torn up before. He was always smiling, laughing, basically being where the sun shined out of his ass, but this was unnerving. He wished he could help somehow. What happened after leaving the school? Katsuki took a couple steps slowly toward them while Hitoshi stood there unsure what he should be doing. Izuku, Katsuki said as he kneeled down. Kachan, Megumi, she, protecting me, and, Izuku sobbed as he turned to face his best friend. Katsuki's red eyes widened seeing Izuku's front. As expected, Izuku's eyes were red and filled with tears. His throat had a dark bruise that looked to be healing, and Katsuki thought he could see where someone's fingers pressed too hard. Izuku's face had a few burns littering his jawline, which Katsuki took a very educated guess that Izuku's fire breath caused. He certainly didn't have those injuries when he saw him a couple hours ago. What the happened? Had that villain attacked Izuku? Katsuki wanted to march right outside and blast his ass, but he knew better since things were already taken care of. What caught Katsuki's attention more was Izuku's erratic breathing. "You gotta calm down, damn it," Katsuki said, clenching his hands to keep himself from touching Izuku and making things worse. Izuku only shook his head. He understood the fact that people died. It was the way of life, but they didn't understand. She saved his life by giving up her own, willingly. She knew she was going to die if she used her quirk to save him, but did so anyway. He loved her for it, but it was just so painful. She was always saving him and he felt like he had done nothing to help her. He had done nothing. They both. Hitoshi looked at his friend and felt the overwhelming urge he had felt earlier when he witnessed what had happened at school. He had never felt such a feeling before. Probably because he never had someone do it for him. He never saw and felt the feeling of being saved. Today, it had happened twice and Hitoshi could feel what everyone talked about when they were being saved or doing the saving. The euphoria of joy and relief. Being a hero was simple. As simple as his quirk being good or evil. Sometimes doing nothing is the worst thing someone can do. Hitoshi took that resolve and stepped forward, bumping Katsuki out of the way. "What the hell?" Katsuki snapped about blasting him, but stopped seeing the soft look in the other boy's eyes. "Midoriya Aizawa," Hitoshi called. Izuku didn't answer him and only turned away to cry more into Shota's chest. Hitoshi sighed. "We can't be friends if you don't answer me." What?" Izuku said, turning back to him with a confused look before his face slacked and his eyes went blank. If Izuku hadn't been immediately taken under his control, he would have questioned what he was meaning. They were friends, even after what happened at school. Good. Now take deep, calming breaths. Looking blankly at Hitoshi, Izuku did as the other boy asked and his breathing slowly came back into control. "Now rest." Izuku's eyes closed as he slumped against Shota as he started to fall asleep. Izuku took in tired yet peaceful breaths as he rested. Everything was so quiet, like everything stopped for a moment to be able to catch back up. Although his mind raced a mile minutes, still he was lured to sleep by Shinso's cool and heroic quirk and his dad's chest and heartbeat. Hizashi put a hand on Hitoshi's shoulder, grabbing his attention. Hitoshi flinched, afraid he had done something wrong. However, upon looking up at the pro-hero, he saw the man smiling and nodding to him. Doing something means you're a hero. Hitoshi felt a sense of pride that he did good. He did good with Quirk. He was able to help more than he thought he could. Shota brushed some curls out of his face and hugged him. Once they took Megumi away, Izuku hadn't been able to calm down. He wanted to save her, but Shota knew it was too late and didn't want Izuku to experience the pain even more. He would one day have to face that pain becoming a pro-hero, but Shota wanted to spare him as long as possible. Eventually he worked himself up, and that's where Hizashi found them. "Shota, what happened?" Hizashi asked. "Villain attack," Shota growled, then looking at the young eyes watching. "I'll explain more later, but a villain attacked the hospital. Same one I took down not that long ago. He recognized Izuku's name or something and attacked him. Would have killed him until Megumi saved him. Hizashi, she used the rest of her quirk to save him." "Hizashi, I mean it when we need to talk." Hizashi's eyes widened at the statement, knowing full well what he meant. Megumi had used her quirk to the fullest, saving Izuku's life. He must have been in rough shape if that was the case, and Hizashi hated the feeling that he was grateful for her saving his life. He couldn't picture him arriving on the scene of Shota holding his dead son. That would have destroyed Shota after learning how he hadn't been able to protect Izuku at school, then losing him here. Everything was adding up and he was sure Shota would tell him the full story later, but at the moment it wasn't a good conversation to have in present company. "Who's that?" Hitoshi whispered to the complacent Katsuki, who looked off to the side with glassy red eyes. "His grandma," Katsuki answered as he wiped his nose and eyes with his sleeve. He wasn't as close to her as Izuku, but he respected the woman and her bomb-ass cookies that she would never give up the recipe to. No wonder Izuku was so torn up. From what he understood and learned about Megumi, she was a true hero and saved Izuku's life. He silently bowed his head, thanking her from the bottom of his heart for saving his best friend's life. Hazashi and Hitoshi had a quiet night after dropping Bakugo off at his house. Hitoshi was surprised the blonde gave him his phone number and said to text him telling him if he was friends with Izuku, then he guessed they were friends too or some shit. Bakugo's words. Izuku and Shota were required to stay at the hospital for their injuries and statements, but would be going home the next day. Hazashi said they'd figure out things in the morning as he showed him the guest bedroom in his own apartment. If you want a change of clothes you can look in either the closet or drawers. Izuku has left some things here that'll probably fit you. If not, then I can for sure look through my old stuff. Do you wanna just chill tonight? Hazashi said. If you don't mind, can I just have some time to myself? Hitoshi asked nervously. Totally, little listener. I understand, you've had quite the day. I was going to order something in because I sure don't feel like cooking. Any preferences or allergies? Hazashi said. No, Hitoshi said, shaking his head. Alrighty, Hazashi said with a smile. I'll come and get ya when it's here. With nothing else to say, Hazashi left with the door cracked, leaving Hitoshi alone with his thoughts. As he suggested, he went through the closet and drawers wanting to get out of his school uniform. He found a pair of gray sweats and a black t-shirt that said, "Bed shirt," in white. Hitoshi was beginning to think neither Aizawa had any fashion sense, but he didn't have much room to talk. Hitoshi laid on the comfortable bed thinking about the day. He woke this morning in his raggedy bed needing to get out of the house before he woke up. He was also annoyed because he was starting a new school and he just knew things wouldn't be good if he saw before he left the house. He was right considering he bothered to roll his drunk ass off the couch to show up at the school. However, things didn't end as he expected. He didn't expect to see his father getting knocked on his ass by a pro hero, staying with said pro, or making 2 new friends. He looked at his phone and sighed, unsure of everything. Just deciding to take everything with stride and humbleness. That started with dinner. Hitoshi wasn't a picky eater by any means, but like anyone he did have a favorite food. He just didn't want to bother the pro and he could rarely eat it, having to stick with simple rice and miso soup because it was cheaper and it was easier on his throat. What surprised Hitoshi the most was the fact he was given an option and Hazashi was rather easygoing. He didn't yell despite that kind of being the man's job. He was pretty cool. "Heyo, dinner's here," Hazashi said as he only knocked on the door. Hitoshi looked on in shock as the man was respecting his privacy and then turned to the clock to realize almost an hour had gone by. Hitoshi nodded and went out to see what was on the menu. He was met with a platter of various foods. Ramen, curry, gyoza, rice, yakitori, miso, and, "Since you didn't give me any preferences, I got a little everything," Hazashi said, getting out plates. "This way I can really find out what y'all like. Don't feel obligated or anything." Sushi, Hitoshi said rather softly. "We got that. Couple different kinds. Plenty of food for tomorrow, and even if it's still too much I'll bring it over to Shota and Izuku. Now let's feast before it gets cold." Hitoshi gave a small smile before taking all the sushi. Hazashi didn't say a word, only smiling at the boy, making a mental note. Hitoshi woke in peace and not to the sounds of his father yelling. He looked around the rather plain bedroom and reached out, touching the soft blankets. It was so comfortable that as soon as he laid down the night before he was instantly out. He actually didn't remember putting a blanket over himself. Had present Mike Yamada done that? Most peaceful night's rest he had in a long time. No screaming, no bruises, no choking, nothing. Hitoshi took a calm breath. "Good morning, listener. Breakfast is ready," Hazashi called. Hitoshi nodded, reminding himself about what happened yesterday. He might have escaped. Things felt right. They felt safe. Tossing the blankets off, he put on the lone slippers and walked out to the kitchen. "Thank you," Hitoshi said as he sat down at the bar. Are we leaving soon?" "Where to? You got somewhere to be?" Hazashi asked as he sat down, a bowl of rice with an egg over it. "No, I just mean like to the police station or something. You know, to talk." Hitoshi clarified. Oh, Hazashi said as the figurative light bulb went on. Nope, it's a home visit. I know her, so she's more than happy to come out here to have a more neutral and comfortable setting. Knock, knock. That's her now. Right on time as usual, Hazashi said, dancing over to the door and opening it to see a familiar face. Mrs. Junko, a pleasure as always. Yes, pleased to see you too, Mr. Yamada, although I'd wish under better circumstances than a work case. Hazashi smiled as he let the red-eyed platinum blonde woman in. Very serious about her job, but to their surprise not much older than them by only 5 or so years. Now Mrs. Junko, as she married a couple years ago, but nonetheless he was glad he kept her contact information even after she stopped making visits for Izuku to Shota, him, and Nimari. Even after the adoption had been finalized, she still kept in touch to check in on him. It wasn't every day you placed a kid who appeared from who knows where into a home with a young pro hero. They were actually invited to her wedding and Hazashi could say she was a family friend. He trusted her with these kinds of things than anyone else, which was why he personally called her before anyone else was informed. She's take of Hitoshi like she took care of Izuku and all the other kids she helped over the years. Agreed. Before we start, how's Izuku and Aizawa? She asked as a flash of concern appeared in her eyes. They're okay, alive, Hazashi answered, unsure what to say. I can tell ya about it later. Very well. Sorry listener, Hazashi said, turning to Hitoshi. I bet you're a little confused, but this nice lady is Mrs. Junko and she works for social services. Otherwise I call her the Izuku benefactor or Shota's bane of existence. She handled Izuku's case when Shota first took him in and who I called yesterday. Thank you Yamada, Junko said as she got out a recorder and paper. I also work with the police on cases like this and such, so I can take your statement, so you'll only have to give it now. I'll make sure you stay safe. Hitoshi looked at the fire in the woman's eyes and the sensation from yesterday was back. The feeling of being saved and wanting to give it back to others. He took a deep breath. He could do this. He could be brave and for once, save himself. It started after my mom died. ... Thank you for giving me your statement, sweetie. That was very brave. With this, the pictures, the statement I got from President Mike, and his criminal charges, you'll probably never see him again. I can guarantee he's lost parental rights to any child. Thank you, Hitoshi said, bowing to her. It's my job to make sure you're safe, but you're welcome. Junko said as she patted his head before going to put everything back into her bag. With all this I think we're all taken care of. Wait, Hitoshi said, what's going to happen to me? He was all my family I had left, so. Oh, we already took care of that part, so no worries listener. Hazashi said, if it's all right with you, I'd like to foster you. I think it's a fine match. Junko said, smiling at Hazashi as she tapped her glasses. Her eyes had pink hearts in them a second ago. The overwhelming relief he was safe and with something who actually cared was something he dreamed about. Hitoshi wouldn't tell a soul he started crying and would deny it if anyone asked. After getting discharged from the hospital, Shota and Izuku had a more lazy couple of days. Most of the time Izuku would cry himself to sleep or they'd watch movies. Izuku noticed some of the time that his dad was either on his laptop or talking on the phone. He didn't eavesdrop in case it was official business, which a couple of the conversations sounded to be exactly that. He simply just went to his room until his dad came looking for him. However, one of them sounded like a lawyer or at least talking about suing someone. Izuku didn't know who though, and hoped they weren't going after his dad. It wasn't until day 3 he heard something. Izuku, we need to talk about something. 3 things actually. You're not in trouble, but these are important decisions and discussions. Okay, Izuku said, sitting down. Shota sighed. These were going to be some loaded conversations that he wished he could put off, but couldn't. Eventually Izuku was going to get involved or start having questions. Hear me completely out before speaking. I'm taking you out of school until next school year and you'll be homeschooling the rest of this year. This is just until things die down with Aldera, such as the drama and the lawsuit I'm filing against them. I'm not budging on the lawsuit, so don't try to make a case. Izuku, those kids bullied you, told you things I don't want to think about, and hurt you to where you needed professional medical care. No one did anything. Your teachers were supposed to protect you. Your principal blamed you, and I can't let that go, especially as a father and a hero. Once the next school year starts, we'll see about re-enrolling somewhere else out of the list I've made. I've also spoken with the Bakugos and they're doing the same. You and Bakugo are smart kids and will be fine. I'm sure Shinso will also transfer where you are so you won't be alone, as I've talked with Hizashi, but you need to socialize with other kids your age. That leads me to the next topic, your surname. What about it? Izuku asked. Sorry. It's fine. Shota smiled. The villain recognized your name as mine. Apparently my civilian name conjoined with my hero name is out there somewhere. It shouldn't be. We need to discuss going only by Midoriya. Having Aizawa attached to it is putting a target on your back I didn't think would exist. I'm sorry. It's fine, Dad. Can I think about that one? Shota wasn't sure what he needed to think about, but he nodded. They had time anyway. If Izuku was going to go by a different surname, it would be mainly for public records such as school. On everything else he'd still be Midoriya Aizawa, but everyone would call him Midoriya, which apparently was his mother's maiden name. Shota didn't want to admit it, but anyone saying Midoriya Aizawa was a mouthful. We've planned Megumi's celebration of life party. She doesn't want a funeral or anything sad. Izuku snorted. Exactly. Shota smirked. Remembering when the little old lady got on a rant, she talked up and down that when she went no one better be doing any sad shit and told the boys to take notes. I went ahead and asked Detective Tsukauchi to be ahead of things, but he found her family, so if we wanted we could extend an invitation if that's what we wanted to do. Is this something you'd like? Izuku thought about it. At first thought, the answer was no. Megumi talked about how her family were kind of selfish and how they didn't support lives that were dedicated to others. Izuku didn't think they deserved to be included. However, she talked about her great niece who she loved, and she might have some family who may have changed their minds. We should at least try. Hello, old friend. Glad to see you back on your feet, Tsukauchi said to the tall blonde man who walked in the station. They shook hands as the detective led him into his office and then closed the door behind them. Yes, quite so. It took longer than I thought in the US, and then the fight. The man as he sat down across from him. Yeah, that's part of the reason we need to talk. I'll get right to it, Tsukauchi said as he put out some papers on the table along with pictures. All Might, I don't think he's gone. All Might. Yagi Toshinori's eyes widened as he looked at photographs of tanks housing unnatural monsters and the various quirks just one could use. They didn't look human or remains of what could be considered once human. But how? Toshinori asked. A couple days ago a villain attacked a hospital. The villain was screaming about the demon lord and finding a child. We got that much information when we questioned him. The hero on the scene found this in the morgue. We're getting warrants to check all hospitals in the area for similar labs. We found detailed lists about various quirks from people, most of them children, All Might. A lot of them were crossed off, or deemed not conclusive. We can only speculate what that means, and at most we assume he's looking for a specific child. This might be something bigger than we believed, especially if he's involved. Toshinori gritted his teeth and took into a harsh yet calming breath to keep himself from buffing up into All Might right there. This was awful. Those things used to be people. People were being basically hunted for their quirks. Browsing the list, he saw a regeneration quirk on the list. All for One was injured in that fight, no doubt, and he was trying to make a comeback and probably had plenty of people hiding in the shadows doing his dirty work. He would one day rise again, and he feared he wouldn't be strong enough this time to stop him. Everything was getting weaker. Had been for years, decades even. Toshinori sighed. It's what we've been afraid of. He's making a move. My master always told me he was searching for something besides the power of One for All. You said he was after a child. It's been passed through over a century, but the predecessors of my power have held the power of One for All to one day stop All for One, but also the responsibility for looking for All for One's child. He planned talking to Toshinori about that subject as they hadn't been able to all these years, but the matter of monster-making morgues seemed more important at first. However, It seemed like both cases were right up front as the pieces clicked together. Sukauchi dropped his cup of coffee on the floor as it shattered as he thought back to that day over 13 years ago when he walked into the hospital where two pro-heroes had a baby they found supposedly from 100 years ago. It couldn't be. It was right under their noses the entire time. He needed to make a phone call. Chapter text. Toshinori followed Sukauchi as they headed to an apartment complex on the other side of town in the early morning at around 8. They stopped by a cafe quickly to grab coffee, which Sukauchi left with 2 cups and not just one for himself. Toshinori assumed they were both for him. He wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. He's seen the man go through a pot in half a day before. After speaking to his friend the day before, the detective immediately whipped out his phone and made a phone call. The call went on for a while as Toshinori listened awkwardly one-sided. After confirming they'd meet the next day, which was now that morning, Sukauchi explained what was going on. The child he mentioned to him all those years ago might be him. They may have found all for one's son right under their noses the entire time. You say he's been living with a pro-hero? Toshinori asked. Adopted, Sukauchi corrected. Pro-hero Eraserhead. I've worked with him for over a decade and he really cares for him. Izuku couldn't have ended up in better hands. Real good kid and wants to be a hero like his dad and you. Gets him in trouble sometimes as you read the report when he was preschool. Since your injuries and being overseas isn't reliable, I haven't had time to update you. The boy's quirk, he essentially can use any quirk of a person's DNA he ingests or what Aizawa thinks comes in contact with his own DNA. I don't know why I didn't see it sooner. I should have jumped on a plane and told you myself. This was what you were searching for. It wasn't a top priority compared to what was happening. The boy was safe and still is from what you've told me. If what we think is true, then he might not have any clue of his whereabouts. A part of me wonders if he forgot about the child. Who knows how much longer though, and I sincerely doubt that. Sukauchi said. I'm sorry I haven't been of any help with the information you provided. I never learned the first user's name, so the name you provided didn't help. There's so little I know about those who came before me besides my master. It's not your fault. We're all at fault. We couldn't burden a child and hopefully Aizawa will know something. He never told me how he found the name out. If this is him, I want to be involved in his life as much as Aizawa will allow me to support him and watch over him. If there is a chance his father is still around, he'll come after him. I want to be able to stop him before it's too late, or at least look after him as long as possible. Toshinori said. Is it the power? The detective asked, keeping it bland. Yes, he sighed. It has become more straining to use every day and more so in the last 13 years. I can't help feeling like something's missing. Never mind that. Hopefully the power won't be something the boy will have to worry about. Is it all right we visit now? It's quite early and I assume the boy has school. Sukauchi looked to the ground and bit his lip. He didn't tell Toshinori about Izuku's school being under investigation for the cruelty. It didn't pertain to him, so there was no point telling him. He was also worried about the man freaking out and taking matters into his own hands. If they needed to tell him about Izuku's current situation, then they would, but this was all a bunch of what-ifs until they had concrete answers. When answering the phone yesterday, he noticed that Aizawa originally thought he was calling about the school and was surprised it wasn't. The pro told his son that it was a work call, which wasn't a total lie, but had him apparently leave the room. The lab Eraserhead found revealed some gruesome information that led them to the question Aizawa had for over a decade. Who was Izuku's real father? They're here. Izuku's school is closed for the moment and they've recently had a death in the family. Sukauchi explained. Oh, I'll have to give my condolences. Toshinori said. He was glad to hear this mysterious child had found a good home, whether he was looking for him or not. However, after reviewing the case and statements, how could Izuku Midoriya Aizawa not be the son of All for One, the very same child he had retaken the task to look for? Aizawa said coming now was the best before Izuku wakes up so we can talk before. They have to go out later today, but that isn't until the afternoon. We're here, Sukauchi said before knocking at the door. Moments later the door unlocked and opened, revealing a man in pink sweatpants, a long-sleeved black shirt, and his long black hair tied up in a bun. He looked tired with dark eye bags and a bit of a scruff. Toshinori wondered if this was the right place, and if it was, this was Aizawa. The man looked exhausted, but from what he learned he was an underground hero with a teenager. Tsukauchi, Shota said as he nodded. Morning Aizawa, sorry to have woken you up so early. Peace offering, Tsukauchi said, holding out the extra cup of coffee. Thanks, and it's fine, Shota sighed, accepting the delicious caffeinated drink. It's about Izuku, so it's important. I haven't been getting much sleep as of late, neither of us have actually. He's out right now and I'd prefer it to stay that way for a bit. Of course, Tsukauchi nodded as Shota allowed him inside. This is who I was talking about, that would have more information on Izuku's true origins. This is Yagi Toshinori. Toshinori felt a pulsing as he stepped in the apartment. It felt like a red thread of fate was pulling him. Although the end was quite a bit away, something was calling him in the apartment. The emptiness he felt inside him felt slowly coming whole. An empty he's felt since he was no longer quirkless. A thrum in the back of his mind, his heart, felt like a cat pawing at him trying to gain his attention. Pleasure Aizawa, I was overseas and then was hospitalized for quite a while upon returning to Japan. Don't worry about it, Shota said, leading them into the living room and taking a chug of his coffee. Let's get right to it. What do you know about my son? Toshinori was taken back a moment. Tsukauchi wasn't kidding when he said Izuku had ended up with the best possible parent. The man got right to it. Aizawa clearly cared for him and took his well-being very seriously. I've already filled in Toshinori about how Izuku came into your care. Tsukauchi started. Not much to it. He fell out of nowhere from the past and landed with me. Shota snorted. Yes. Izuku was born approximately 113 years ago to Inko Midoriya, and in a note left by her says she sent him into the future to protect him from his father. A father we haven't been able to identify, but we have a pretty scary guess. We weren't sure until you found the hospital lab. Scary. The man's dead, Shota said, but noticed how both men looked nervous. He is dead, right? He is not. Toshinori ignored the chill up his spine and thought it best to take over. We believe Izuku's father is a villain named All for One. A villain who has been in the shadows for decades, gaining power so he may continue his goal of whatever it may be. His quirk allows him to give and take quirks. It wouldn't surprise us if he managed to get his hands on a quirk that allowed him to survive this long. Toshinori revealed. He continued on telling him about how the man was All Might's greatest nemesis and thought he had been defeated. How he enjoyed himself at the expense of others. People became indebted to him and did his bidding for him until they were no longer of any use. Hearing that he once had a wife and had a child had been quite a shock. He wasn't quite going to reveal himself unless he had to. That sounds insane. Shota sighed as breathed out and put his head in hands. This had to be true. Why would they pull his leg about this? Izuku never did anything half-assed. Of course his father wouldn't be some Yakuza thug. No. He had to be some monster during the dawning of quirks that wanted what? World domination. It's the most logical conclusion, and we unfortunately have no way of officially confirming it to even move forward. I can do that. Toshinori brushed off the twinge in his chest. Shota had an odd thought. They might have a way to confirm the suspicions, but he didn't want to. There was one person, although not really alive, who would know for sure if what they were saying was true. However, to get those answers Shota had to tell the hard truths, meaning Izuku had to find out. Even if they went around it somehow, like using simple yes or no with questions Izuku never saw, his son wasn't stupid. He was very smart and knew how to ask questions. Also Shota couldn't lie to him and knew if they did some roundabout way Izuku would only get angry. He was 13 and Shota guessed he would have to learn sooner or later, especially if the man was still alive. He couldn't coddle and protect him from the truths forever. We may have a way. When Izuku was around 4 he had a supposed imaginary friend named Chi-Chi. I later learned this was a ghost quirk or something that was actually his uncle. That's how I learned Yoichi's name. Izuku. The thread felt like it was getting shorter. Toshinori's brain was putting the pieces together as he listened to the man talk. Uncle would mean someone's sibling. From the records on his mother, she was an only child, so this would be his father's brother. His brother who could be the first wielder of One for All. Since arriving he felt very small bursts of power flow through him, like the power was happy and excited. Uncle Yo. All three of them stopped and turned to where one saw his son and the other looked upon a curly green-haired child with freckles looking curiously. His eyes still held some sleep as he rubbed at them. Sorry to wake you, kid, but I guess this works out. Izuku, is he here? Shota asked his son. Yeah, Izuku answered before pointing behind the blonde man he's never seen. He heard his uncles yelling, which was what woke him up, and he figured it was best to see for himself what was going on. His dad told him he was having a small meeting that might include him, but don't worry about it unless he came and got him. He's next to him. Toshinori ignored everything else as he stared at this boy. Certainly didn't look like his father and must have gotten everything from his mother. He didn't know what it was, but something was drawing him toward him. He ignored it, but it was almost like he felt the boy coming toward him before he appeared. He felt like he knew him, but that was impossible. He's never met this boy in his life. He felt a part of himself inside him. This was that threaded line of fate. Izuku looked at the blonde-haired man with his uncle he hadn't seen in years. When Izuku was around 10, Uncle Yoichi said he had to go and didn't know when he'd be returning. He maybe saw him once a year, and it was only to pop to make sure he was still safe. Izuku begged him to tell him, but he refused, saying it wasn't his place and to remember what his dad said. However, that wasn't all that got his attention. For some reason he felt like he knew him. Aizawa, I think it's time to tell him. Tsukauchi whispered. Shota hated to admit that he was right. After speaking on the phone yesterday they couldn't avoid it. Izuku needed to know where he came from, and putting it off wasn't helping anyone, especially Izuku. Tsukauchi said he had connected all the dots and the man who he brought along would be able to shed more light than he ever could. Tell me what? Izuku asked. Shota got up and walked over to Izuku. He put his hands on his shoulders before guiding him over to the couch to sit down next to him. He put a hand on his knee and patted it. He felt so sorry for his son. This was probably going to be the worst week of this kid's life, and Shota couldn't decide whether it was getting worse or not. Izuku, I want to say first I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to deal with this, and I won't let anything happen. Shota said. I know that, Izuku said, unsure about where his dad was going with this. This reminded him of when they had the adoption talk all those years ago. He trusted his dad, but this was kind of starting to scare him. You remember when you told me about Chi-Chi? Shota started. Izuku snorted, seeing Yoichi's eyes narrow as the man groaned a little. He wasn't a fan of the childish nickname, and Izuku called him that to tease him. Yeah, you said there were some other things I needed to know, but didn't tell me because I was too young. Correct, Shota nodded. And he didn't tell you? Hell no, I died once and don't want to find out if I can again. Izuku laughed. No, he took your threat seriously. Good, Shota mused, but took a breath because he needed to be delicate. Parenting books didn't prepare him for this kind of conversation. Izuku, I think we may have found out who your actual father is. Oh, Izuku said. Who is he? Well, we have a guess, but we need your uncle to confirm it. Is that okay? I don't really get it, but yeah, Izuku said. Is Izuku's father someone named All for One? Shota asked out loud. Izuku saw Yoichi's face change as he looked sadly at him. It was like the answer pained him. Yes. Izuku didn't understand why everyone got super tense. He was aware that his actual father was a villain, a pretty bad one at that, but was he really that bad? Shota took a deep breath and exhaled loudly. Dad. Izuku, this next part may be hard to swallow, but keep an open mind. Izuku nodded. Izuku, your father was apparently once the most powerful villain in Japan, an SS rank. He and your mother were born over a century ago, and so were you. I didn't find you after a villain attack. You appeared out of nowhere in a warehouse that I was on a team raiding with a note telling me she sent you to the future to protect you. Izuku looked at Dad wide-eyed. His dad wasn't one for games or pranks, but Izuku did a quick look at the calendar to make sure it wasn't April, and he decided to lighten the mood of the last few days. He was born over a century ago. But how? He was only 13. He just had his birthday in July. He didn't know what to think. He looked down at his hands unsure of anything. Many thoughts kept jumping in and out. Who was he really then? What happened? Why was he here? Izuku. Izuku looked up at Yoichi and then realized as he touched his face that was crying. He was so overwhelmed by everything. He bet if he could fully comprehend everything going on he'd be panicking. Izuku, Shota said, grabbing his attention as he cupped his face before pulling him into a hug. You are still Izuku Midoriya Aizawa. You are my son. How you got here doesn't matter. What matters is that you're here now and I couldn't be happier that you are. Izuku wrapped his arms around his dad, happy that he was able to read his mind. He didn't think any of this could be real, but it wasn't like his dad, he was happy. The life he could have had didn't sound as great as the one he had from what he understood in history class. He was supposedly born during the dawning of quirks and that was a rough time. Essentially flipped the spectrum where being quirkless was normal and you were hated for having a quirk. It was crazy to imagine how fast things flip. His father was a feared villain and his mother died, most likely protecting him. Thanks Dad, Izuku said. So is my actual father not dead. Smart kid, Toshinori said. Yes Izuku. They believe he's still alive and I will protect you if he ever tries anything. As will I, Toshinori interrupted. I've been deciding whether or not telling you would be beneficial to the situation, but I believe it is. Before Shota's and Izuku's eyes Toshinori stood up and buffed out into the number one hero. All Might was currently in their living room and Izuku was conflicted with the weight of everything he just learned or fanboying. Before the man left he absolutely needed to sign something of his. He was definitely going to show that to Kachan later and watch him flip his shit, then give him something Izuku asked for him to sign for his friend. He wasn't that cruel. You're All Might. Izuku stuttered. All Might deflated back into his skinny form and sat back down. He coughed a little into his hand. Yes, I've been fighting your father since I was given the power he's been after. Your uncle had a quirk called One for All that your father sought out and still does. Your uncle told my predecessors to keep an eye out for you and watch over. So who the hell messed up? Shota snarled. Don't get him wrong. Whichever user messed up should be scolded, but he can't be mad since if they hadn't Izuku wouldn't have found his way to him. Their job was literally to make sure he didn't appear alone or literally in a warehouse used for villain smuggling. Granted he was aware they couldn't watch over the spot 24/7, but they knew where and could have ties to be alerted if some random kid appeared out of nowhere. Secret hero privileges and stuff like that. Toshinori swallowed hard. He knew the answer and it was honestly one he wished he was wrong about. Nana was the one who told him she never looked for the child because they were probably lost and a child had no place being in the war. The look in her eyes said otherwise. He remembered asking about where he could look, wanting to continue the legacy asked by the first user, but she refused to say more. The look said she was bitter, which contrasted against the smile she taught him always to wear. I'm afraid that was the seventh user. My master, Toshinori told him. I don't truly understand why, but she refused to speak about the secondary duty of the bearer of One for All. Only mentioned it to me because someone else did. She died years ago and thus I wasn't given any information to go off on. I regret not pushing the matter in order to keep you safe. It's okay if you didn't know, Izuku said before his dad could. Looking out the corner of his eye, he could see his dad wanting to say something that would most likely come out wrong, more rude, but came from a place of wanting to protect him. Thank you, Toshinori said. Like Aizawa, I will protect you if it comes down to it. However, I believe you and I are connected more than I realized. Perhaps your uncle can shed some light on the feeling I've had for quite some time. What? Izuku questioned. Please keep this to yourself about my power. It can be passed on from person to person by the will of the user. It stockpiles quirks in one day to defeat All for One. Your uncle was the first person to have the quirk One for All. I am currently the eighth. Since receiving this power from my master, the power has felt almost hollow. The power given to the quirk is there, but the quirk has felt almost empty. The previous users aren't there guiding me. I believe that's because I believe part of One for All lives inside you. Good. He realized it too. Izuku turned to Yoichi, who was nodding along and looked so relieved. I only have one quirk, well 3 technically, but I don't have your quirk All Might. We just met. Izuku panicked. He's right, Izuku, Yoichi said, grabbing the boy's attention. I didn't realize it until Kudo passed One for All onto Bruce, but I had unintentionally split the quirk between the two of you the night we sent you to this era. It's the reason you can see me, since I was the one who passed it on to you. The other users haven't been connected like they should and need to be put back in One for All to achieve its true potential. Izuku put his head in his hands. This was all so crazy. He groaned loudly, startling the adults in the room. He felt his dad put a hand on his shoulder and give it a light squeeze. Izuku, Shota asked, are you okay? Do I have to tell them? Izuku asked Yoichi. I can't. Izuku, we'll believe you, Shota said. He knew getting Izuku to relay information with Yoichi was difficult. It didn't help when people thought he was being weird before about it. Now they might have a reason why his son could see his uncle. Izuku wished this wasn't one way. He really didn't like being the messenger and silently thanked his dad for realizing it. What if he couldn't explain it correctly or they thought he was making something up? Those were his biggest worries. Izuku took a breath and revealed what Yoichi told him. His dad didn't look surprised at the fact Yoichi was informing him, but more of what he was saying. All Might looked like he was coming to a conclusion and the detective looked the same, but perhaps a little lost. That would make sense why the power feels hollow. Your thread hasn't been continued while the one has since they split up. They need to be conjoined again. The first user might know more than me. Well, how does the power transfer and I'll give it to you? Izuku said. He didn't know how this happened, but he certainly didn't want to prevent the number 1 hero from doing his job. Toshinori began to chuckle. Nothing was said about him giving up his half and he assumed with such sincerity and selflessness. This boy really was a good person. Aizawa did a good job raising him. He would think if this would be any other child being told they had part of All Might's quirk they would demand the other half, but not this one. This child offered it back to him without a second or hesitation in his eyes. I should have seen it earlier. What, Uncle Yo? Izuku asked, making sure the others knew they were speaking. Your quirk allows you to take quirks from others if you consume their DNA. One for All is passed on by DNA. I'm willing to bet your original quirk was similar to All for One and One for All modified it. Except you just copy it and don't fully take it. Just like what happened to me. It made it into a new quirk which is applique. You technically have 2 different quirks. It's just a guess, Yoichi explained. Yoichi knew from the moment Izuku revealed he could see him that One for All must live inside him. It must have been when he coughed on him as a baby. Some of his saliva must have entered his mouth. Since it was in the middle of transferring to Kudo, One for All split, branching into 2 separate partial quirks taking a component with it. Kudo continued his thread of One for All through the generations, stockpiling the power until it reached 8. Yoichi realized he couldn't connect with 8, or was he 9? No matter, he couldn't talk to any of the other users because he was actually connected to that part the way he should be. He could only tap into the power and follow Yagi around, never able to fully interact with him. He bet Izuku held the part that connected them together, which was why Izuku could see him. One for All wasn't complete without the conjoining users from past to present. He was a ghost to him until the parts were connected again so they could meet and fix this. Uncle Yo says that One for All is passed on through consuming DNA and the way my quirk works might be because of that. I can give you something like a piece of hair or something. Izuku said, about to pluck out a curl. Toshinori didn't have any doubts before that Izuku was telling him the truth about this entire situation, but now there was proof. Izuku wouldn't have known that mechanics to the quirk without someone telling him. The pull he's felt since arriving. The emptiness that haunted him. The look in the boy's eyes that held so much promise. A madness that was starting to burn and had ignited once already when he was just a little kid who hadn't received his quirk yet. No, my boy, Toshinori said, stopping him as he smiled at him. Even in this form he held the same smile Izuku saw on the screens. I believe you, so don't worry about that. I've always felt the power pulling toward you. I'm offering it to you. Become the rightful successor to One for All. The quirk shouldn't be with him. The boy was as Sukauchi said. A good kid, and if he wanted to be a hero then he would be the next generation, the future. It looked like his path in finding his successor was decided for him. Chapter text. No, my boy, Toshinori said, stopping him as he smiled at him. Even in this form he held the same smile Izuku saw on the screens. I believe you, so don't worry about that. I've always felt the power pulling toward you. I'm offering it to you. Become the rightful successor to One for All. The quirk shouldn't be with him. The boy was as Sukauchi said. A good kid, and if he wanted to be a hero then he would be the next generation, the future. It looked like his path in finding his successor was decided for him. What? I can't do that, Izuku exclaimed. Him take All Might's quirk. He's the #1 hero in Japan. Known throughout the entire world as one of the greatest heroes. No one has not heard of All Might. What if passing on this torch took away his quirk? It's my quirk actually. Izuku glanced over at his uncle and the man put up hands in defense. Now wasn't the time. He was dead and wasn't currently using it. Not that Izuku would ever say that to him. It sounded too much like his dad. Toshinori chuckled. It is the best option in the long run. I was injured in a fight years ago with your father. I have been looking for a successor since then and I think this is perfect. You carry that missing part of One for All, and even if I took your part one would have to pass it on eventually. You still want to be a hero, don't you? Toshinori asked. Yes, more than anything, Izuku said with a smile. Then that settles it. I can't think of anyone better. I think we should wait a couple years to hand off the power. You said he should have it, Shota said as his eyes narrowed. Why would he tell Izuku he was worthy and then not give it to him? In a way it was his to begin with. Call him paranoid and protective, but he hoped the hero wasn't trying to pull one over his son. This wasn't a matter that could be toyed with. Yes, he should, but the stockpiled power of my side is very powerful and needs a fully developed body to endure it. You have to be strong in body, not just your mind. Once he does some training I'll happily give it. It should reconnect the quirk. I don't think it'll be that easy. Izuku lifted his hand to stop the adult's conversation and allowed his uncle to continue. While Eight's a part of One for All is connected to the user's strengths and the power they've passed on, yours isn't. I'm only theorizing, but I suspect your half creates the soul connection between each user. While you'll need Eight's, I don't think that'll do it. Are you saying we need to connect them to me? Izuku asked. But how? They're all dead. What did he say? Toshinori asked. He said just having yours won't be enough. That I may need to connect to the past users, but they're all dead. That does pose a problem. Toshinori said. Well, how about this? You train to accept the power and Sukauchi will look into finding a way to connect with them. You arrived here so there might be a quirk that will somehow connect to the past. Don't worry about this. This will be the least I can do. This sounds like a plan. Izuku wants to get into UA and I was going to start training him after this year. We'll both keep each other updated on the progress we've made. Shota said. Izuku, don't worry about anything except when we start training. Leave this to us. You don't need to burden yourself more than you will have to. Shota looked into Izuku's eyes hoping his message got across. He hated that Izuku was going through this and this might ultimately be something he has to do alone. He was 13 for goodness sake. He shouldn't have to worry about world saving and taking down villains for a few years. He should be worrying about school, hanging with friends, and being a kid. Young Izuku, I know you are aware this must be kept a secret. Toshinori said. Izuku, to make it clear you can tell people the basics like how your mom died and that your father is a villain. That might come up, but you understand what you can't say, right? Hazashi and maybe Nimari might know because they already know about your origins. Shota reiterated. He was aware his son liked to talk and in a flurry of emotions could let things slip, so he'd give him something. Didn't help him and Bakugo were thick as thieves. The blonde could sniff Izuku lying or some bullshit from miles away. I understand. Izuku nodded. I won't tell Kachan. Especially not that brat. You always say that, Dad. Izuku laughed. And I mean it every time. Shota snorted as he ruffled Izuku's curls. Dot, 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 All Might. Before you go, can you sign these? What the hell, Izuku? I'm not sorry, Dad. That early afternoon, Shota and Izuku made their way across town to a small quiet neighborhood. Thankfully the weather was cooler, so Izuku wore a jacket he could zip some up to hide the bruising on his neck that still hadn't quite faded. The burns on his face were another story, but Shota used some concealer to blend them into where only someone really looking could see. Once everything healed, more Izuku would be more comfortable. He just didn't want anyone questioning him or his dad, which was also why Yoichi went with All Might. He could hear everything they came up with and bounce the ideas off Izuku later. The neighborhood was where Megumi's sister lived and told them she'd have the family over to discuss whatever they wanted. Having already been informed of her passing made this easier. A simple ring of the doorbell was all needed before an older woman with the same facial structure as Megumi answered the door. "Hello. You must be the Aizawas," the woman said as she bowed. "My name is Naoko. Thank you for meeting with my family." "Thank you." Shota bowed back alongside Izuku. "Come in. The rest of the family is in the living room," Naoko said, guiding them. As they reached the living room, they saw a rather large family. An older man, who Shota assumed was Naoko's husband, and who looked like her children and grandchildren. All had similar blue tint hair. "Everyone, these are the Aizawas, Shota and his son Izuku. They've been Megumi's extended family," Shota supplied. "She's been like a grandmother to Izuku since he was a baby." "I'm so glad to hear that," Naoko said as she picked up a frame that had a picture of a younger Megumi who had bluish hair at one point. "Megumi is my older sister by almost 9 years. She's always been headstrong. She never had any kids because of fertility issues, so I'm glad she had your son." "Yes, she and Izuku were very close," Shota said. "I'm sorry for the family's loss." "Thank you, and I too for yours. We were designated her next of kin when she passed. We've decided to forego a funeral service and have a celebration of life party as she requested. Izuku and I wanted to extend an invitation to your family," Shota said, wanting to get out of there as soon as possible. He hadn't heard too much about the family, but he'd rather not stick around long where someone could say something insensitive. "Oh, that's so sweet of you," Naoko said happily. "We'll have to see. While we became rather estranged from us the last 15 years, I still loved her. She helped care for me as a child. If you don't mind me asking, the officer wouldn't tell us, but how did she die?" Izuku stepped closer to Shota and grabbed his shirt. Shota could feel Izuku's hand slightly shaking, trying to calm himself down. Izuku was seeing a therapist soon and Shota hoped it would help. "We're not at liberty to discuss that as it's a part of an investigation." "You law enforcement young man," the husband piped up. "Something like that," Shota answered. The older man grunted as he eyed them. Not surprised Megumi died, as she was always careless with her life and her quirk. Giving her time to people she didn't know when she could be helping her family. She would have seen that we were right along. Her quirk probably killed her. Not sure if you know, all our quirks deal with our vitality. Our family seems cursed to have quirks that put our lives on the line to use. What about us? We just want to make sure we live the fullest lives we can." Izuku's mouth dropped as he stared at them. What the hell? Being in any field that helped someone was admirable, whether someone was a hero, first responder, medical, social services, education, or anything. As long as they were passionate and genuinely cared about the well-being of others. "She died saving my life," Izuku yelled before he even knew what was happening. "I got attacked by a villain and she saved me. That's how she died. She was my grandma because you all didn't deserve her. She was kind. She was brave. She was inventive. We offered an invite to her celebration because she told us that despite the way you left her alone, she loved and missed all of you. Do you all think so little about those who help others?" "Boy, you wouldn't understand," the other son said. "People who help others don't think about those they're close to." Izuku swallowed his nerves before he held back his tears before ripping into them. "I think I do understand. You talk about how you value family lives, but what about other people's families? She saved my life so her family, me, could still be here. So I wouldn't die and leave my dad. Megumi saved so many people with her quirk, and I'll do the same. Izuku had never been so angry in life. He wanted to scream at them. These were her family. Megumi was nothing but kind and thoughtful. She cared so strongly for others she risked her life to make sure those patients went home at the end of the day. She was a hero. Izuku, Shota said, pulling him back and turning him toward the door. For now he had to ignore the tears in his son's eyes. My apologies. As I mentioned, they were close. I'll leave the information about the gathering if you change your mind. Shota left the card with the information on the table. Izuku had taken the hint and calmly exited the home before his emotions got the better of him, and he decided best to follow his son before anyone else said anything to make things worse. Shota wanted to turn around and tell don't bother coming, but Naoko was nice and she at least deserved some respect, especially in her home. Hopefully she'll leave them at home and any views she shared behind if she decided to come. The living room was tense and the family could look at one another and see the anger flashing across all of their faces. A young girl, a couple years older than Izuku, looked at her family and sighed. Her grandma had told her so much about her great-aunt after her father cut her off from seeing her years ago. She inspired her and she wanted to know more about the woman she only heard about, but had such an impact on her life. She did want to be a hero after all. Hey, would you all feel the same if I got into UA and became a hero? The girl with swirled blue hair asked as she twirled it between her fingers as she looked at her family in concern. She could see all over their faces. They wouldn't support her and her father looked angry at her. She pouted her cheeks. Dear. Her mother tried to placate her as she reached out. No, I want to be a hero and I want you all to support me. Auntie Meg was who inspired me to be a hero. I can't heal people with my quirk, but I can fight for them and I think that's one of the coolest things ya know. She said as she took off to catch up with them. The way the boy talked meant he had lots of stories about her auntie and she wanted to know everything she could. She told her family about her dreams since she was a little girl after being watched by her aunt while homesick one day from school. She told her how their quirks were the lights in people's darkness. It wasn't long after that day her father cut her off from seeing her. Regardless, her nana told her the most heartfelt stories and maybe if she fought on the front lines less people would go to the hospital and get to go home. Hey, wait up a second. Izuku and Shota turned around to see one of the kids they saw running toward them. She was the older one there as the others looked to be in primary school. Can we help you? Shota asked. Totally. I want to know more about Auntie Meg. I'm applying to UA next year and I want to become a hero like her. She's the one who inspired me from the stories I've heard about from my nana. Oh, are you her great niece? Izuku asked, remembering how Megumi talked about her smile and positive attitude. This girl was exactly as she described. Vibrant, joyful. Izuku might think she was what Megumi might have looked like in her younger years. Right, I'm Najire Hato. Hitoshi stopped to catch his breath as he lugged bags up the stairs to Hizashi's apartment. He didn't want to think of having to go back for the rest. The man was insane. They went out shopping in the morning to get everything Hitoshi would ever need, and then some. Hitoshi didn't think he owned this much in his entire life and freaked out when Hizashi kept piling things into the cart. The man simply waved him off saying he had savings for this kind of thing. Not to mention he'll have 3 jobs so any expenses are a-okay with him and he'll be happy to provide Hitoshi with anything he needs. Hitoshi eventually relented and let the man do as he pleased, realizing there was no stopping him. Hitoshi got a bunch of clothes, a new phone, bedding, books, a laptop for school and play, and a couple new games for the system Hizashi already owned, but never used, claiming he never could sit down long enough to play. He said Hitoshi could use it and even invite friends over or they could have a night in and compete against one another. Hizashi also mentioned that since Hitoshi will be using the guest room, his room, for a long time he could decorate it however he wanted. They could even order online later and have it delivered. They boxed up everything belonging to Izuku a couple days ago and Hizashi said he put it in the closet just in case. Tonight we're going over to Shota's for dinner. He and I have to talk about some hero things. This will also be an awesome chance for you and Izuku to talk more. If you two listeners are going to be friends then you're going to have to talk more. Hisashi said as he brought in everything else and set the actual groceries he bought in the kitchen to put away. Oh, Hitoshi said. He hadn't had a chance to talk to Midoriya Aizawa since the hospital and they hadn't even really talked before. The last real conversation he had with the other boy was at school. A school he wasn't going back to ever. Hisashi explained that Shota, Eraserhead, was suing the school and Hisashi agreed the three of them be homeschooled until next year started. He was fine with that. He'd get accustomed to living with Hisashi and hopefully become better friends with Bakugo and Midoriya Aizawa. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Great. Also I bought the supplies so tomorrow night we can make our own sushi. Hisashi said, holding up the bag and grinning. What? Hitoshi questioned. I think it'll be fun to try. We can do whatever we want and if that doesn't we'll just order our own. Hisashi explained. Sushi is your favorite food, right? Yeah, thanks. That does sound interesting. Hitoshi nodded and smiled. A warm feeling enveloped his chest as smiled. The few days he'd been living with Hisashi had been great. It reminded him of what his parents were like before his mom died. He knew this was his foster placement for the moment, but things can change. He didn't want them to though. He liked staying with Hisashi because he was pretty cool and listened to him. Also, can we talk about something? Hisashi asked, looking rather nervous. Sure. Hitoshi shrugged as he sat down at the bar in front of him. Hitoshi was speechless and internally panicking, although Hisashi would never know as he asked. Hitoshi kept a straight face as the man continued to ramble on. I know it's quick, but we've got time. Think about it. You don't have to say yes. Izuku looked at his phone where he had a new number saved. Najire Hado. She was super nice. Her quirk, wave motion, was pretty cool too as Megumi's spiraling light was converted into healing energy, hers were powerful blast waves. She was in her final year of junior high applying to UA at the end of the year. Izuku wished her the best of luck and said they'd talk together all the time as Najire said they were friends. Izuku was glad. He had 3 friends. Well, he wasn't sure where he stood with Shinso, but apparently Uncle Hisashi was coming by tonight to talk with his dad about what they learned that morning. When Izuku learned about Shinso's home life from his dad, Izuku was so relieved that his uncle had been there to help out and save him. We're here, Hisashi said, bursting through the door around 6. I thought I told you to knock. Shota deadpanned. Knocking is for strangers, Hisashi said as he put down everything before winking to Izuku. How's my favorite nephew? Fine, Izuku said. Izuku, Shota said, grabbing his son's attention. Hisashi and I need to talk about hero business, so do you mind going to your room with Shinso for a bit? We'll call when dinner is ready. Yeah, come on Shinso. Izuku said. Without a word Hitoshi followed Izuku as he looked around the home of his favorite hero and his new friend. The place seemed so lived in and loved. Pictures were hung up in the hallway that showed Midoriya Aizawa at various ages from a baby to what looked to be recent. He was smiling in each of them and even Eraserhead, Aizawa, had a slight smile gracing his face. Midoriya Aizawa's room looked the way he might expect when he was talking to Bakugo. A nerd. Books lined the shelves from personal notebooks to academics and hero posters were plastered on every open inch of wall. So how are you? Izuku asked as he turned to look at him. Hitoshi heard the question, but didn't answer as his focus was more on Izuku's face. He remembered what he looked like at the hospital. The once dark bruise on his neck was healing nicely as it was barely noticeable, but he had dark patches that still looked red on his jawline. I think I should be asking you that, Hitoshi said, pointing to his face. Oh, Izuku said as he looked in the mirror. I had them covered earlier while we were out. I kind of forget that they're there. Sorry if it's unsettling. No, Hitoshi said, it's not. You just have had a rough few days. Trauma isn't comparable, Izuku said. We both have had some rough times, but what's important is that we're healing and moving forward. I'm interested in being your friend Shinso. So I'm Izuku Midoriya Aizawa. Super pleased to meet you. I hope we'll be good friends. Hitoshi smirked. Wow, this kid was really one of the good ones out there. He actually had a friend. 2 friends. And maybe more. Hitoshi admitted going to that hell of a school even for just one day wasn't so bad. I'm Hitoshi Shinso. And thank you for what you did for me the other day. You're welcome. Everyone deserves help. And you can call me Izuku if you want. I know my last name is mouthful. We're thinking about changing it. Changing it? Yeah. Well, the kids were right. I'm adopted and my dad just added his own to mine to keep my actual one to pay tribute to my mom. I never met her, but someone that knew her tells me she was great and loved me. Can I ask? Hitoshi asked. Oh, my mom died in a villain attack caused by my father. Izuku revealed for the first time. He now knew why he was officially adopted and he was still coming to terms with it. He might tell Kacchan that much since Shinso knew that too. He can just say something came up and dad told him the truth, without telling him the full truth. Hitoshi kept his face as neutral as possible. It was clear what Izuku was implying. His father was the villain who killed his mother in an attack. From the looks of it, it seemed to have happened when Izuku was a baby. Too little to remember and too young to understand. Is he? Hitoshi asked. His villain was currently being locked up, but was Izuku's? No, Izuku said as he looked away. I'm sorry. It's fine. I'm still learning how to cope with it myself as dad just told me not that long ago. Today in fact, he wasn't going to tell him that. They'll catch him and if not I'm going to be a hero so maybe I will. Apparently he knows I'm alive and might come for me. Izuku said. He was definitely going to have to tell Kacchan all this. He was going to be jealous if he didn't. So does your father know your last name? I mean your mom's. Izuku's eyes widened for a moment at the thought of someone else having the same idea. He thought about it earlier, but with the confusion of the day he hadn't asked his dad about it. Clearly if Hitoshi thought it then his father could. Maybe. Well, why not just combine them? I thought about it. Thanks. I'm glad I have someone to bounce ideas off of. You're welcome. Hitoshi smiled. Speaking of bouncing ideas off, can I ask you for advice? Of course. What are friends for? Izuku smiled. Hisashi asked if he could adopt me. Izuku's face brightened up like a Christmas tree and that alone told Hitoshi a lot of what he needed to know. This was going to work out fine. The months passed by in a blink of an eye. Izuku, Katsuki, and Hitoshi all got closer as friends and often found themselves at someone's house working on homework or hanging out. They were diligent with their studies and actually finished the school year early so had some time before officially returning to the classroom. Izuku tried to convince his dad to homeschool him permanently, but Shota wasn't letting it happen, putting his foot down that Izuku needed to socialize. They'd cross the bridge when it came to it. Izuku ended up telling Kacchan what he told Hitoshi. Why he was actually adopted and in Kacchan's words, your sperm donor is a piece of shit, when he mentioned his actual father. The blonde proudly said if he showed his ugly face he'd blast it off. Izuku appreciated the sentiment asking to wait until they were licensed. Kacchan reluctantly agreed, but kept giving Izuku side eyes. All Might and Tsukauchi didn't have any leads on his said piece of shit, but apparently might have a way for Izuku to contact the previous users of One for All. It wasn't a solid idea yet, but it could be the best way. All Might said he still needed to do some research into what the quirk did and how it can be applied. He warned him it would take training and Izuku said he was prepared for the challenge. All Might simply chuckled and said to worry about being a kid for now and hang out with friends. Megumi's party was a small get-together with Shota, Izuku, Kacchan, Hisashi, Hitoshi, Naoko, and Najire. Since the apartment was still paid for they had it there and afterward they all agreed to help pack everything up. Izuku was surprised they showed up after everything that happened. They laughed. They cried. They smiled. Izuku got to hear stories from Megumi's childhood and her family got to hear all about how Megumi literally invited herself into their lives. Another person showed up as well and that was the lawyer who went over the will. Megumi left everything to Izuku, Shota, Najire, and Naoko. While most of it went to Izuku, she still thought about those she truly cared for in her family and even in death she was still being petty. Izuku almost died laughing when the lawyer gave Kacchan something. Finally, Katsuki exclaimed as he held out a piece of paper that was her cookie recipe that was tucked in her personal cookbook. She always did say she'd give me the recipe when she was dead. Kacchan. Izuku had a texting best friend in Nejire since they rarely got to see each other. Oftentimes while she was out of school they'd meet at a cafe and talk about anything. Mainly just about Megumi and becoming heroes, but Izuku loved that he had someone to share this part of his life with. He told her about all that happened and she said when he got to UA if anyone bothered him to come tell her. He learned recently that she had passed the UA Hero Course entrance exams and sadly enough, her family wasn't thrilled and tried to convince to switch to general education. She mentioned her parents had been ignoring her. Izuku hoped it wouldn't get any worse and made the older girl promise if it did she'd come to them for help. Speaking of UA, his dad got a job there as a teacher which was so cool. He'd be teaching the homeroom for the first year heroics course. Izuku wondered which class and if Nejire would be in it. Uncle Hizashi also worked there as an English teacher so she'd definitely see him. What wasn't cool was hearing about how he was going to expel people who didn't have potential. "You're bluffing. Am I Izuku?" The patented Aizawa look told Izuku what he needed to know. He prayed for those souls and wished them luck because they were going to need it. Once a week for a couple hours his dad was training him and it was hell. Izuku hurt in places he didn't know he had. Izuku could only relish the fact that Kachan and Hitoshi suffered alongside him. Hizashi has officially adopted Hitoshi not that long ago after everything with his own father had been settled. The man was going to prison for long enough for when he got out Hitoshi would be an adult. He lost all parenting rights which allowed Hizashi to swoop in and adopt him immediately thanks to Mrs. Junko. Hitoshi changed his surname too. Shinso was his father's name and wanted to be rid of it. He didn't want any reminders of that man who hurt him. He was now Hitoshi Yamada and Izuku couldn't be more excited for his friend. Shota won the lawsuit against Aldera which officially shut the school down to later be reopened the following year under a completely new staff and constant check-ins. All of Izuku's previous teachers were prosecuted and were either being retrained to be monitored or losing their license to teach. The principal was fired and arrested, not only because of what he did. He was apparently stealing money from the school and Shota wouldn't let him get away with putting his hands on his son. Jigoku actually went to juvie for assault and public quirk usage with intent to cause harm. Shota wanted attempted murder on there, but Izuku wouldn't let it happen. To Izuku's surprise, and Shota's apparently, they actually received a settlement from the board. Shota thought it was just to protect their own asses, but he wasn't about to complain. It was a decent amount. Izuku was already aware of this, but they were moving soon. They needed a fresh start. Shota had been thinking about this for a while and with his new job this would put him close to his work in Izuku's new school, either of which they decided on. They'd still be living in an apartment as Shota didn't want to commit to a house, but this would be a 3-bedroom. The original plan was to have Megumi move in with them. They planned to get settled before school started. School wasn't something he wanted to think about, but it was coming down to needing to make a decision. His dad narrowed down 2 different schools where they could go to. Some or Mustafa Private. Both had reps for being good schools and while no school wouldn't have bullying they cracked down on it including against quirk discrimination. Shota said he would be making sure things were okay and Izuku promised he would tell him if something happened. It wouldn't be so bad as Katsuki and Hitoshi would also be going there. His dad left it up to them to decide where they went and it was also Izuku who decided on what he'd be called. On any official documents he was still Midoriya Aizawa, but they couldn't risk being traced back to either his hero dad or his villain father. While his family and closest friends would call him Izuku, to everyone else he would be Azaria. "Izuku, are you ready?" Shota asked. "Yup," Izuku said with a smile. They were going back to the hospital for the ribbon cutting. The hospital had some damages thanks to the villain attack so they opted to remodel and add on. They also needed to gut a few places, but Izuku never learned why and assumed it was because of damages. The emergency room was moved a little over to make room for the newest addition. The same wing where Izuku lost his grandmother was now known as Megumi's Wings of Light. A place in the hospital where anyone could go for help for whatever they needed and someone would find their way there to help. No judgment, no hate, just safe. Later it might become a place where when Izuku was licensed he could continue to use her quirk to help those. Shota wasn't entirely thrilled by the idea, but as long as Izuku was monitored he would allow it if that was really what Izuku wanted. Some threats might have been made if the hospital forced Izuku. Izuku knew this was what he wanted, to help Megumi live on her dream and his. He would be a hero and he would make sure it all came together to make the world a little brighter. To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.